Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the Thursday, November 21st, 2019 Watertown Board of Adjustment meeting. Jill, can I get a roll call, please?
Dargits Johnson.
Here.
Ford.
Here.
Dolly.
Here.
Culhane.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Stein.
Here.
Kays.
Here.
Jeff Brink is absent. We have a quorum.
The first item on the agenda is the approval of the October 24th, 2019 minutes. I need a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Now, items 2 and 3 are specific uses contingent upon an annexation and zoning proposal. That's on the Plan Commission meeting agenda for this evening. I'd like to take the Plan Commission agenda items up before we go to that, so I'm going to go ahead and skip to item 4 on the Board of Adjustment agenda here, which is Robert Graff, DBA Sign Pro, asking for appeal number 19977. Jill?
Application was submitted by owner applicant Robert Graff, doing business as Sign Pro, to construct a non-conforming 324 square foot addition onto a non-conforming building located in the C3 Highway Commercial District. I will orient you towards that property. Said addition is proposed to be constructed 14.8 feet from the side or south property line where a minimum 20 feet is required on an existing 2,766 square foot non-conforming commercial building, which currently sets 10 feet and 14.8 feet from the side, north and south property lines where a minimum 20 foot is required, and 21.5 feet from the front east property line where a minimum 40 feet is required. The application was denied based on ordinance requirements, and so the applicant appeals these requirements of the zoning ordinance. Staff finds that there is approximately 1,967 square feet of buildable area available on this 12,357 square foot parcel within which to construct or enlarge without additional variances from primary setback requirements. Currently, the property utilizes 8 non-compliant inset boulevard or on-street parking spaces on South Broadway for customer parking. If application is endorsed, this board has the authority to require fulfillment of any and all boulevard infrastructure requirements in conjunction with any structural improvements authorized by building permit.
Thank you, Jill.
Jill, would you just put that picture up there? And for the audience, would you show on there where the proposed construction is to occur?
It would be right here in this southwest corner of the building, and I can bring up the site plan also.
And that would be in line with the existing protuberance to the south?
Yes, the encroaching portion of this building to the south, it would be in line. It would be filling in this corner here.
And the property to the north is Zone C3 as well?
Yes.
And this property, like some of the others in the area, predates the C3 requirements as they exist today. So from a square footage standpoint, I noted that this one has a significantly lower square footage than what would be required to plot a new C3 lot on bare ground today, both total square footage and lot width. Is that correct, Jill?
Correct. This building was actually constructed by a Meitinger in 1985 when it was commercially platted at that time, or zoned at that time.
When that property was zoned, was it Zone C3 at the time of that construction?
It was.
And was there a variance granted to the southern edge of that property at the time? Or how was that structure built? Or had the side yards changed? Or how did that get a building permit?
Actually, the original C3 building that was constructed in 1985 was constructed in a C3 zone, and it actually did not go through the Board of Adjustment. It just was issued by the building official at the time.
So by virtue, the city blessed that construction in 1985.
A legal permit was issued.
I'd like to open the public hearing on this if anybody's here to speak on behalf or against this particular proposal. If you are, go ahead and approach the microphone and state your name for the record.
Yeah, my name is Bob Graff, and this is my property, and we're here just to get that variance so we can just expand the business.
Thank you, Mr. Graff.
Bob, the staff had put together this idea that you could construct it between the two buildings and not need a variance. Have you considered or looked into that?
Well, we just thought because of the building the way it was, I approached the board one other time about adding onto the back garage to the east, and we just pretty well decided not to do that. And by doing what we're doing here, we can just use the existing heat and electricity and everything that's in the building.
Is that gonna be more for like a storage area or?
No, that's all heated, that's just that's a garage area, and if you look at the one photo from the rear of the building, it's garage area.
Okay.
For driving vehicles to work on.
This is what Bob was referring to. He had approval to do this addition onto this existing garage at one point, but did not go ahead and construct that.
Where are you currently working on the vehicles without this
We're
addition?
we're in the building, but we just need more space.
So it's an expansion of
Yes.
workspace.
Yep. Yeah, it's about 324 square feet we just want to add to that corner of the building. We're not going out past any walls. It's just going to square the building up, basically.
How long have you been located there, Bob?
So I bought the building in '99, I believe.
And what was the reasoning behind not pursuing the previously approved
Well,
plan?
it's basically cold storage, and then we decided, well, maybe we'd put plumbing and heating, and then we looked at all the prices for doing that. And it would have gave us more room, granted, but we thought just tying onto a piece just onto the building would just be a lot easier
Okay.
and a lot cheaper.
Jill, if this corner were able to, if we did grant that variance, would he still have buildable space to add on to the existing garage storage back there? Or would this,
How much available space does he have before he maximizes capacity?
Well, he has a space here of 20 feet in from the north property line, 20 feet in from the south, and basically up to this non-compliant structure, where he would probably come back to the board for enlargement of non-conforming structure, but not for variances from setbacks or additional variances from setbacks.
What's the percentage of usable lot that you can use in the C3? Is there a maximum?
There is not, it's just a setback regulation.
Okay.
And as we said before, the variance being requested here isn't any worse than the existing structure. It's in line with the existing walls.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Any additional questions for Mr. Graff? Thank you, Mr. Graff.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the public to speak on behalf or against? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. We'll look for a motion from the board.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve. I recommend approval of the 18 by 18 addition to the existing building as applied for. Basis and reasoning for the variance is that the city has blessed the southern boundary of the existing building, and with a previous building permit in 1985, the enlargement or addition does not further intrude into the southern setback, and that would be my basis.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Kays and a second by Colhane. Any additional discussion? We'll take a roll call vote.
Kays? Colhane?
Yes.
Stein?
Yes.
Dargits Johnson?
Yes.
Ford?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Dolly?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Jill. Now, at this time, I'd like to request a motion for a temporary recess where we can pick up the Plan Commission for the zoning and annexation.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Case,
Second.
second by Colhane. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're recessed.
Dargis Johnson.
Here.
Ford.
Here.
Dolly.
Here?
Colhane.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Stein.
Here.
Kays.
Here.
Oletsky and Brink are absent, but we have a full board, so there's a quorum.
First item on the agenda is the invitation for public comment participant submittal. If you'd like to speak at the end of the meeting today for a brief time, we'll have a time for that, for anything that's not related to an agenda item. Second item on the agenda is
Hang on,
approval.
Blake. I think we did have somebody maybe in the audience. Anyone on feather signs?
If you'd like to sign up to speak in the open public comment, I think we have a sign-up sheet up front here. And then we'll get to that at the end of our normal agenda. Item 2 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
A motion by Colhane. Second by Dargits Johnson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes from the October 24th meeting. Need a motion for approval.
So moved.
A motion by Kays,
Second.
a second by Ford. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. We'll move on to item 4, Resolution 2019-32. Brandy?
Thank you, Blake. So this is an annexation and zoning proposal. Here, I'll pull it up so we have an idea of what area I'm talking about. And so there's actually two kind of that coincide together. We'll talk on this one first. So this area is being proposed to be annexed and zoned as C3 Highway Commercial District. The owners are Bob and Pamela Drake, and they have petitioned for the C3 zoning designation. I'll turn on the adjacent zoning. So you'll see to the north and the west, that land resides in the county. To the south, it's R1 Single Family Residential, and to the east, there's C2 Local Commercial District, which is Kempeska Lodge. Park dedication is not required since it's proposed to be commercial property. The annexation and zoning will extend to the center line of the public right-of-ways adjacent. There's approximately 10 acres within this area. And then we'll also be acting on this in the Board of Adjustment meeting for the proposed conditional use of contractor shops. Other than that.
Thank you, Brandy.
Brandy, while we'll be addressing the issue in the Board of Adjustment, the C3 zoning designation isn't solely for contractor shops, correct?
Correct. So, and that's a conditional use. So there's everything in the C3 districts that's a permitted use that would be allowed if this is zoned that.
For the purpose of the public hearing that's going to be coming, I think it would be beneficial to have the section of the zoning ordinance up there that shows the different types of uses.
Sounds good. There they are.
And Brandy, was there discussion between the distinction of C2 commercial property versus C3 for this particular parcel of land?
So, and actually with the next agenda item, that will be that area that will make it adjacent. So say that both were annexed and zoned as C3, then this would be adjacent to more C3 zoning, which is then adjacent to the highway. I think just for the use of what they're hoping to do with the property, C3 was more fitting.
Let me go ahead and open the public hearing related to this. If anybody's here to speak on behalf or against, you can go ahead and approach the microphone.
Chairman, before we open the public hearing, would you entertain a motion, given the volume of folks here, that we perhaps limit for some sort of reasonable limitation on time for people to talk?
Yeah,
A minute and a half, 2 minutes, something like that?
I was just going to say the same thing.
Do we have an indication of maybe how many people intend to testify? Let's start with that. By raising of hands.
Maybe it's not an issue then.
Maybe not an issue.
Okay. We'll just try to do this in an orderly fashion. If you'd like to speak, let's go ahead and approach the
Chair, again, due to this, I would recommend asking for proponent testimony first and opponent testimony second. If we have proponents, maybe we have them testify first, and then we can keep our notes together and then bring up the opponents after that.
I think that's a good suggestion, Mr. Case. I will ask then for a proponent of the proposal to come and try to enlighten us and the audience here on the proposal that's at hand, and then we'll get into the additional public comments.
Can I ask a question? Are we taking this in two separate votes, one for the annexation and one for the zoning? Or is it one vote?
I believe it's two separate annexation votes and then the zoning.
Yeah.
Annexation and then a zoning. So do we have a public hearing for annexation and then a public hearing for zoning, or is it going to be combined in one public hearing?
And Mr. Chair, I would almost recommend that we could be taking comments for both proposed zonings and annexations at the same time. If we can combine that public hearing for both action items, we'll have separate action items, but rather than having a public hearing, we could get all the testimony at one point in time, because they're married at the hip.
Do you, maybe we should do the background on that other proposal then?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, because I think that it would make sense to just have the public hearing for both because they are related.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, just for
Yes.
clarity, Commissioner Kays, are you referring to, as in both actions being the annexation and zoning for this particular parcel of land? Or are you proposing to combine the separate parcels into one action or discussion here?
I'm not talking about the action, I'm talking about for the purpose of receiving public testimony on since the owner of the property owns both parcels and they are adjacent to one another, if we could just hear the public comment on the proposed annexations and the proposed rezonings on both properties.
Both petitions.
Yeah, we could hear it all at once, as opposed to keeping things, I think they're gonna be interrelated and we're gonna have to crossover in testimony, so.
Yeah, I agree.
If,
I
And that is typical with the way that we've done things before in relation to the public hearings. While we will take the resolutions as individual actions. Yep.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just from a staffing perspective, I might recommend that you keep the parcels, public hearings, discussions separate, just because you may not want to have one parcel's discussion influence the other parcel's discussion in consideration of separate public hearings. They are two separate applications. I would just heed caution in that respect.
I guess where I'm at, based upon staff's discussion, that if the triangular piece is zone C3, then this would make it a reasonable ask or a request because it's adjacent to C3. If that was the case, I would then, if we want to keep them separate, I would invert it and deal with the Highway 20 application first, if that has a bearing
Yeah.
on the subsequent ask.
That's what I was thinking too. I would agree with that.
It's the chair's discretion.
May I speak?
Into the
Yes, sir.
My name is Douglas Austin. and
Here you go, buddy.
My name is Douglas Austin. I was prepared to discuss all of them at the first time, and it would help my presentation anyway if I didn't have to do the separate.
Yeah.
And I think you're not the only one, sir. That's
Yeah.
why I was suggesting that we can take the comments. Hopefully, the seven of us can
agree. I think-
separate them in our
I
mind.
think we can differentiate when we approach the resolutions. You know, if you're here to speak on one of these in particular, it would be, you know, beneficial for us to know exactly, you know, which parcel you're talking about, if there's a difference in your mind between the two. But for the purpose of discussion, I think we'll open the public hearing for both simultaneously.
Yep.
I'll let Brandy speak on the review, and then we'll get into the public comments.
Okay, so this gets into then agenda item number 6, and this is commission consideration of resolution number 2019-35, a zoning text amendment to chapter, oh, whoops, that's not it. Okay, this is 2019-36, initiating annexation of attractive land contiguous to the city of Watertown, known as the Dunn Second Edition, and then the subsequent C3 Highway Commercial District designation. So let me pull up a map here so you guys are familiar. Okay, so the other petition that we had was this area over here that you can see. Now we're talking this area. So again, the adjacent zoning designations to the north and west is the county, and then the south and east is R1, and then again with the C2 property to the south. This is approximately 35 acres. Portion of the property is within the floodplain, and then the property was previously approved to be zoned C2 for the request at that time.
The previous request for C2, did that not move forward then from annexation and zoning standpoint?
I don't think that went in the direction of the project, that the project was going, so that was never recorded. It was approved by council, but it was never recorded with the Register of Deeds.
And when was that?
That was September 22nd of 2012.
Could you say that one more time, Brandy? That sounded very confusing to me.
So this property was previously proposed to be annexed and zoned as C3, and then they downzoned it to C2, which didn't fit the project.
Who's they?
The previous owner,
All right.
Dunn's. This was in 2012. So just assuming it didn't meet the project parameters anymore, so it was never recorded. So this property was never officially annexed and zoned, although it was approved to be.
It was approved by the council in 2012, but because it wasn't annexed, it wasn't recorded
Yep.
with zoning.
And it was approved as, it was approved by the council as C3, not C2.
It was C2.
It was C2.
Thank you, Brandy. So public comment is open. Mr. Lawrence.
Mike Lawrence, I'm working with Bob and Pam on this project. I've been involved on some Lake Compesca rezones in the past, which, you know, the precedents you set less than a mile from this location, very similar location. That's what got us looking at this particular property. We started working with Mr. Dolly on April 15th. We signed a purchase agreement on this property on August 22nd after the rezone of the other property went through. We decided that, you know, it's a very similar location, less than a half a mile from there. We met with Miss Dunn a couple of times and kind of went through our plan. That was one of the things that, gave her confidence in selling it to us, is that we want to do something kind of neat and different. Our plan with the Triangle property is to create a campsite cabin mixture, so that it would have, and I'm going to get into that more in the Board of Adjustments because this is just for the rezone, but I want to make sure you're clear. One of the things that you guys did have an issue with us on the last one, and which was not my project, was that it wasn't clear what was going to happen with the property. You wanted to know exactly what was going to happen with the property. Well, here I am coming, and I took that in consideration when we came up with this. We're looking to take this and put mini cabins on it. One thing about Lake Compesca is it's a great asset. But if you're coming from Sioux Falls and you want to come down here for the weekend and stay and you don't camp in a tent or a camper, this is, you have no option. There is no option for lodging to come down here. I spoke to some of the neighbors that I know around the area. I can tell you that there is some people that are going to be worried about this. Obviously, I can fill a room up pretty good, but I assure you that we're not going to build something that, I live less than a mile from here as well. I drive by here every day. Our plan isn't to make this place worse or do something that's going to put the neighborhood up in arms. I spoke to Doris Wilkie. She said, I'd be dumb not to want something like this across the street from the lodge to increase traffic. These same people are going to be driving by North Shore. These same people are going to be coming to the lake and spending retail sales tax dollars. As far as the contractor shops, the reason I went with a contractor shop is because in our ordinance, we can't put a toilet in a storage unit. Most of these things are going to be privately sold to private individuals, condos, that many of these people that live close by that don't have the room on their property for some of the things that they want in there. We had a plan for 16 unit condo units, and we have probably 9 to 10 of those spoken for. There is a demand for something like this out there. The closest storage units, we have some at Lakeside Storage. Otherwise, it's on the other side of the lake. So that's what we're going to do. Regardless of what happens here today, our goal in purchasing this land is to develop it. And I want to make that clear, is if this plan doesn't work, there will be another plan. We didn't buy the land to sit on it. We think it's good land, close to the community. We are going to try to develop it, and there's going to be something that fits in the box, or has to be fits in the box. When you purchase a piece of property, we did purchase it on the precedence that was set less than a mile from here, in hopes that we could do something similar, at the same time adding what we are going to do. We could have took the same approach as they did on the last one. Not my approach, but not. And I don't think he still knows what he's doing there. I haven't seen anything on Mr. Dolly's land. But that's kind of where we're at right now. Feel free for any questions.
Mr. Lawrence, do you have any concept plans that you've drafted up for?
I
the
do.
location?
I do. I was going to do that for the campground mostly. Like I said, right now we're looking at the C3 zoning. That's more of the Board of Adjustments. But I can show you if that's what make you feel better.
If you have them readily available, I wouldn't mind seeing that.
I kind of also wouldn't mind seeing them. I don't think it's relevant to this request because I think, in my mind's opinion, we are looking at whether or not this is appropriate use for any of the uses that are located in the C3, not specific to a campground or
Yeah.
storage units.
Correct.
And so,
You have to-
and so in my opinion, it'd be nice to see, but it's not going to prejudice me one way or the other if it's a nice layout or not, because what we really need to be looking at is this the appropriate place for C3 zoning?
And the other thing that and it's something that I kind of have an issue with, the way that some of the zoning is. I didn't want to take this to a surveyor just to get the things that we have in your packet right there, just the drawings there. And I actually paid separately for a survey. That's $4,000 worth of drawings. You know, I didn't want to completely design a campground to come up here, you know, spend another $3,000 on designing a campground just for you guys to tell me that nobody wants a campground. You know, that I'm going to have to go develop something different in that area. So that's something that we did pretty. Did you find it?
Yeah, I did. It's up whenever you're ready.
We haven't worked with the staff. That's something that we're going to have to do. You know, we don't know where Heath wants to egress at. You know, we don't know how much lighting that we're going to need. We don't know the demand. We're not going to build 100 cabins and hope that they fill up. You know, it's more of a see as you go type of thing to see what the demand is, because there is not one of these things on our lake. The only cabins that I know of that are similar to this are the ones by Sandy Shores, and I'm told that they fill up immediately right when they're open. They're filled up that day for the entire season, and they're just two little tiny cabins that sit right next to $500,000 to $750,000 houses.
And so the reason for the C3 designation request was primarily because the plan was for the campground, and that's a listed conditional use in the C3 zoning.
Correct. And the condo shop is because we could have went with a storage yard, but in our ordinance, in a storage unit, you can't have a toilet. You know, and that was one of the physicians that wanted a condo unit here. He wanted to have a toilet in his unit.
So you were aware, Mike, that C2 had actually already been approved at one point in the past.
I was told differently, but I am now aware of that, yes.
Would that have made any difference to your zoning request to C3 if you had known it had been approved at C2 previously?
I don't think so. With the time change, like I said, you are less than a half a mile away, setting a precedence on commercial property. When a developer looks at something that a council like yours does, and makes that precedence and says we're wanting to do that, that's going to spur more people to get into that commercial development. More people are going to take a look at that exact same thing that you said was okay a half a mile from here, in a very, very similar across the street with some buffer, whether it be trees or land. It's going to look at a piece of land like that's very similar and say, this makes sense just like that makes sense. If that makes sense, this makes sense.
I might add too that in the C2 district, you can't have a contractor shop or storage yard. So that would have
Or a
been-
campground. So that's why they're both in the C3. We don't have a very good,
C2 has storage units, but not
not contractor shops. Yes, ma'am.
Explain to me again, what is the deal with the bathroom?
The difference between a storage unit. Oh,
I understand that.
Yep.
Why you have a potential buyer?
correct. Yep.
What are they planning to do with the contractor shop?
Uh,
What
the-
type of contractor?
He restores cars. They're his personal collection, and he wanted a restroom in there while he worked on his cars.
And one final question, Mr. Lawrence, regarding the C3 designation request. We do have a similar contractor shop situation on the southwest corner of the lake that I believe was a PUD. Had that thought crossed your mind on doing a PUD and having something more, specific to the use?
Well, I believe that the far north portion of this property will become commercial C3 as well. It does touch the highway there. We have a marine dealer that we're talking to in hopes to put on that location as well. So whether I start that there and zone it C3 backwards or work this way and go that way, I think we end up at the same result.
And specific to the contractor shop situation, which is very similar to the previously built development in 2014, which was a PUD.
Yep, but that's because it was not surrounded by anything. You can't take a C3 and make a C3 in the middle of nowhere. That as long as it doesn't touch it, it makes sense from a C2 to a C3 to a C3, in my opinion. It's step zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence.
Do you just want to scroll down to this one right here?
Do you want me to-
Just click here.
It's a presentation now.
So here's the map. Our ingress and egress would be down towards the lodge. We would like it to come out straight towards the lodge, so everybody comes in here, has the ability to go into the Kempesca Lodge. There is a secondary access that would be emergency only, and that's, I think, Cutts Avenue. It's kind of like Memorial Park when you go around the curves. They have a little spot where, you know, fire trucks and medical people can get through. It's gated, it's chained, but it doesn't. It's not for everybody. A campground, you only want one way in and one way out for people to check in, check out. You know, so you don't have all that traffic going in and out unnoticed. We have all of our hookups and refuge down here. There is a bathrooms in there as well. Like I said, oh sure, I don't know how to use this, but. So we have, you know, the bathrooms up here towards the lake. We have cabins down this way. This would be more pull in, pull out type of camper, so we don't have to, I mean, this area is a little bit lower where this, you can build a permanent structure on up here. So that's why we're thinking cabins in that area. Like I said, we don't know if this business model even works. So we're not going to go out and try to do the dirt work on the entire property just to figure out that, you know, nobody wants to rent a cabin, you know, but I do think there's a demand, and I think the lake itself could benefit from this.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. I think at this time we'll open it up to other public comment. And is there any additional proponents that want to speak while we're on that section?
Are you on proponents at this point?
Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Julie Knutson. I'm with the Watertown Convention and Visitors Bureau. And from time to time, I get calls from developers such as Mr. Lawrence to come and speak to the project that they're working on in regard to the visitor industry. And so I just wanted to come to you with what we experience in regard to, I guess I'll call it the lack of housing at the lake for visitors that want to come in and spend a temporary amount of time. From an industry standpoint, anytime you can put people near water or on a lakefront or get them a view of a sunset, that is definitely something that people gravitate towards. And so having the lake so close to Watertown, you can see this is a mailer that we sent out. We sent out 30,000 of those year before 2018. We use the lake in all of our marketing, our peak season marketing, and we spend an extremely large amount of money marketing for our peak season. And with having the lake in there, we get a lot of calls, and there's a lot of people that would love to come here, but they can't stay here because the campgrounds, other than with the flooding this year, the campgrounds are typically full. And I know that the cabin situation out at Sandy Shores, those cabins just go like hotcakes. I mean, you can't rent one. People are online probably already trying to, as soon as it opens up for camping, they're trying to get in. And so this is something that's growing from all of the industry experts. They talk about the millennials and they're, you know, wanting the experience rather than just going to a city and not having anything to do. But being at a lake and on a lake, if you have a boat or if you want to, you know, take part in water sports or whatever, you're not going to go stay in a hotel and then just come out to a lake and go back to the hotel. If they want a water experience, they either come here. If they can't stay here in accommodations that they want, we're losing their business to other places. They're going to Minnesota. They're going wherever they can get in. So it's something that we really do hear a lot about in our office. As we market the lake quite a bit, we'll get a lot of calls in the summertime about rentals around the lake. And so that is something that we are constantly telling people, well, we market the lake and yes, you can go out there. And we have our parks that you can spend time at, but nobody wants to just drive out there and swim and then get back in their car and go. So it really is something that we do see in, you know, a growing demand for or a growing request for is housing out at the lake. So that's kind of just, you know, from our standpoint and our perspective that this isn't anything that's going to, it'll definitely be a good thing for the visitor industry. When people are coming to town, they're leaving their money behind, and I think that the additional rentals would be something that people would, I don't think there'd be a problem filling them, and I think it would be something that is being requested currently. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Knudsen. Any additional proponent comments?
Good afternoon, Chris Shilkin, Watertown Development Company. I too have also had many conversations with Mike Lawrence, and the history that I've had when I was economic developer in Devil's Lake, North Dakota, where we did start commercializing the lake there, and the economic impact that it had is increased visitors, and also increase of the tax base. You're going to take bare land, develop it. That's going to increase the tax base for the whole county, help support different activities, and as well as driving traffic through Watertown. Of course, they're going to spend their money, more visitors. So as a development company, and as we talk about developing Watertown, as everybody in this room knows, Lake Compesca is a huge asset that if we can bring commercial development there, it just brings it up to the next level that currently we don't have. And I've seen that firsthand being a part of projects in Devil's Lake, North Dakota. So through that experience and visiting with Mike, would just like to bring that up. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments from proponents? Seeing none, we'll move on to any additional comments. I think you're ready, sir.
Let me clarify my relationship to the group, many of them who are here opposed to the petitions of Mr. and Mrs. Drake.
Would you state your name for the record again?
Let me start off by saying, Mr. Chairman and board members, my name is Douglas Austin. Although I am an attorney, I am appearing as a homeowner for 24 years, living across from the proposed campground. I'm at 386 North Lake Drive. We have we're about right over there. We're in a home that my parents and D.D. Millers bought in 1943 for the sum of $1,800. D.D. Miller had his $900 socked away, and my dad had to go to the bank to borrow his. May Lou and I became owners in 1985 and have enjoyed the home for two reasons. One, we live in 10th and Maple during the off season. We enjoy the water view, but we also enjoy the rural view that we have. The Dunn Farm, silo, the agricultural area, and the openness of that has been an important part of our experience there. The process that we're going through is not an easy one. At least 4 people immediately adjoining me to the east did not receive any notice of this proposed action. And I don't know, there may be a number of other people that did not receive notice. Many of those people are here today because of my interest in making them aware of the importance of what was being proposed here, how it might impact their property values. And so we want you to know that we're very concerned about our property. We're also very concerned about Lake Kempesca and the appearance of the area that surrounds the lake. I remember my impression of Lake Ponset going by on Highway 81 and looking at a trailer camp on the west side of Kempesca, or of Ponset. Some good things have happened to improve our lake, such as water system, sewer system around the lake. But in recent years, there's been some things that have happened that have made us very sad. Certainly the Stony Point area is disappointing and tragic. My father grew up in Watertown and would talk about Lake Kempesca as being 25 feet deep, and you could see the bottom. I think we all are concerned about what the spring holds for us in the way of snow, runoff, and flooding. I have talked to some who feel we should have more time to prepare the papers, to prepare for this. One made the comment that everyone on the north side of Lake Kempesca should have the opportunity to express their objections to these two projects, because they are all going to be impacted upon what the petition is requesting. Watertown is the only large community in eastern South Dakota to have a lake large and beautiful as Lake Kempesca. As far as we're concerned, it's a pearl. Monday or Tuesday, I went to City Hall to see the details of the campground, and much to my surprise, they didn't have any. They did not, and the word that I heard from Jill Steiner was that they did not want to spend money on drawings, surveys, until they had obtained the ordinance. Well, it's pretty hard for us to deal and know what we're up against without anything in the city hands to see what they were proposing. I think that I have seen the and have researched 277601, which deals with campgrounds. It says that no manufactured home or house trailers shall be located in any campground, except that one shall be permitted as an office for campground. Now, they're proposing some buildings here, and I don't know that they fit with what the ordinance is on campgrounds. I think that we think more of they're not supposed to be, all campground operators shall keep an accurate record as to the length of time a person stays in the campground. These, I think of these, you know, of the RVs that are self-contained and things of that nature that will come and be there for a couple days, but these buildings are going to be there the rest of our life. There are findings of the Plan Commission concerning this project, and they have indicated that there are a number of things that have not been supplied that should have been there for consideration for this meeting. The thing that was flashed on the board today is the first time that we have seen that. We have heard that there are plans to use, if you put up the 1 through 5, lots 1 through 5. We have heard that the area across the street is we know that people that go to campgrounds typically want to use, oftentimes pull a boat. And so that we've been told that there will be a camp, or there will be an access that they plan on using would be the one that's next to Clark Hansen, and that once the boats have been deposited into the lake, that they will come back to that lots 1 through 5 for storage area while the boat's being used. Well, in talking to Mr. Hansen, he's indicated that that is only a 66-foot wide area, and typically the popular boat place access is known as sailboat landing. People drive in, drive around, and then back their boats in when they get fairly close to the water. That's not going to be available, according to Clark, in that space next to him.
Is that a public access point that you're referring to?
It is a public access, yes. It's a 66-foot wide access.
Is that county or city?
City.
I remember there being something weird about that. We talked about it 2 years ago or something, that same spot, but the city maintains and owns that.
Yep. They do keep it open.
And then the idea is to take those boat trailers back to the and the vehicles back to the lots 1 through 5 while they're in the water. I'm going to yield my time for just a second to Mr. Hansen to come and speak to you about what he has experienced in that area. It's a hilly area. Traffic is 40 miles per hour, and it seems like they're creating a very dangerous situation. Clark, would you join me?
My name is Clark Hansen, property owner at 444 North Lake Drive. I didn't know that Mr. Austin was going to invite me up here tonight. Thank you, Mr. Austin. But I've had this song going through my head all day today. And I'll make this brief. I'm just going to bullet point a few things here. But the song that's going through my head is, it was popular in the late 60s, I think, and it was, they paved paradise and put up a parking lot. Anybody remember that? Yes. Great song. Never knew it would hit home like it has right now. But let's start with the timing. My wife and I had no idea this project was going on until a week ago Wednesday, when we went into the post office and we had notified that we had a registered letter there. That was our absolute first indication that the Dunn land had even been sold. So I don't even want to get into the deer, ducks, and pheasant aspect of this, except to say one thing. That triangle you see right there is Lake Compesca 500 years ago, 200 years ago, and the way it is right now. It is pristine, natural habitat. And it just breaks my heart, after living at the lake for over 60 years, to see the plans designed for that triangle of land there. Like I said, go ahead, Doug.
I might add that my next door neighbor that built the Hoffman house, that was his duck hunting place. His name was Denny Endall. He was somewhat handicapped, but he would go and lay near one of those ponds in that triangle to shoot ducks.
Like I said, I think there'll be other folks that get into the natural habitat there, the destruction of it. That is not progress to me, not in any stretch of the definition of the word progress. Mr. Austin pointed out the access that borders my land along with Mr. Mogg. And I just want to point out, from the water tower, when you work west on North Lake Drive, approximately 1 mile, you've got the South Dakota Highway 20 intersection. Then you come down, you have Cutts Avenue, where at least a dozen residences, I'm sure, are going in and out of that entryway. Then a quarter mile past that, you have the Compesca Lodge. Then immediately past that, you have 450th Avenue intersecting North Lake Drive. And then just 100 yards past that, you've got County Road 168 heading off to Memorial Park. The shortcut, what I call the shortcut. That stretch of North Lake Drive is one of the absolute busiest stretches of highway around the entire lake. You've got 168, all the people coming from there. You got 450th, you got Highway 20, North Lake Drive, and Cutts Avenue. There is definitely going to be some traffic and safety considerations for the city of Watertown. As far as the public access that borders 442 and 444, like Mr. Austin mentioned, that's a 66-foot wide We went through this years ago with Herb Jensen, and the entire city council was out there. Herb wanted to improve it. The safety concerns negated what they were going to do at that time. That sits right under a hill. I call it the roller coaster of North Lake Drive, where you've got 3 hills in a row. And the access entry is right at the bottom of a hill. It is totally blind to traffic coming from the west. I have lived there for decades, and I have witnessed dozens of accidents and near accidents, squealing at brakes, horn honking, and a middle finger salute right at that access right there. And it's not just the access, it's right where 168 joins into North Lake Drive. And just another 100 yards, it's where 450 intersects North Lake Drive. So there are definitely concerns there. I would go back to the original point. We have not had time to digest this situation. So I will yield time after that and.
Talk about the access and to the water there.
Well, are you talking about the public, the section line access?
Yeah.
Well, again, it's 66 feet. You cannot, with an extended cab pickup and a boat behind you, you cannot go down there and turn around without backing up on Mr. Mogg's property or my property. By the time you've got 2 boats sitting down there, that is filled up and worthless to anything else you want to do there. There's no launch, there's no dock, there's no room for that. This has all been gone over by the city one other time, years back, and they bypassed the whole idea of doing that.
Is there a swimming beach there?
Well, it would be 66 feet, of the public land. We have families that come out there once in a while and will have a picnic there or something, but in general use of launching your boat, no. That is just not conducive to that at all.
Clark,
And
when I was at your place this morning, you said you were sitting at the dining room table, and you said, "This is the view that I have out the window, and I won't have it anymore because one of the warehouses are going to be sitting right there." Is this a fairly accurate description?
Very accurate. I can sit I've sat in my kitchen window for decades, looking out there, and it's the deer, ducks, and pheasant thing. And it's, I can't imagine looking out there and seeing a steel Quonset. I just can't imagine it.
May I approach the chairman to give him this picture?
Yes, sir. This is across the street from the,
Directly across the street. That's, that intersection there is where County Road, I think it's 168, maybe I'm wrong on that. But
This is facing due north.
it's the county road that goes off to the west there, yeah. What
We're
is that?
facing north.
But there's a, if you'll permit me a little bit more time, there's a cluster muster of traffic there. Every summer, I'm sitting on my lawnmower and some guy with a 36-foot fifth wheel stops in the middle of the road and hollers out his window, "Where's Memorial Park?" So I get off my mower and walk out on the highway and explain to him he can either go up the county road or wind his way around the lake. And what we're doing, adding to all that, like I say, there's safety concerns involved in this whole thing. It's a lot more than just people worried about the view out their window.
thank you, Mr. Hanson.
Mr. Hanson has given me a chance to find what I've been digging for, and that is a document that was prepared, I think, by your staff that says before a conditional use can be issued, the Board of Adjustment must have approved ingress and egress to property and proposed structures thereon with particular reference to automotive, pedestrian safety, convenience, traffic flow, and control. And I suggest that that has not been done yet. It provides for showing where they're going to locate refuge and surface areas. They got to show their utilities. All of that should have been done.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Austin, for the public hearing right now, we're strictly speaking about the zoning and annexation of the property. It sounds like what you're referring to is related to the conditional use. So if you have public comment related to the conditional use, we would take that up during the Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
did you want to read these into the record?
We have, and you'll hear us talking about smoke and other things that occur in a campsite. I'll have to admit that I haven't been camping for years. But I got a letter addressed to the Plan Commission from Gene Bethel, I hope I'm saying that, or Bethke, hope I'm saying that correct. He says this: I own a cabin at 438 North Lake Drive and want to just object to the rezoning of the property north of me. We already have lake campgrounds and they're only half full one weekend a year, July 4th. The increased traffic, safety and security, as well as a place of quiet at the lake would change. The boat launch is now nearly unused and would become a hub of traffic and parking for my neighbors. And this is the part I was interested in, since I'm not a camper. Not all campers are loud, inconsiderate, and thieves, but you cannot guarantee everyone is going to be the swell folks they have next door. They never were at Memorial Park, where I have rented for 23 years on different weekends. Coolers and fishing equipment go missing. Music gets loud. Campfires blaze 2 stories high. And of course, smoke would never be a problem. Please do not allow a zoning change to commercial. Next to me is Carolyn Hoffman, and she has purchased the brick home and made a very substantial advancement, and her husband is just recovering from eye surgery. Carolyn is on my right, but she would like this part of the record. We are opposed to the development project. We are concerned about the large increase in traffic in the proposed development plan. If it is approved, this plan will combine a considerable amount of commercial traffic volume with the existing residential traffic. There is also farm traffic that includes large farm machinery and heavy trucks using Highway 20 and 168. There is also concern about protected wetlands. They may be impacted by this commercial development project. There are 4 designated wetland areas, about a quarter of the property, in the area known as the triangle up here. There is the possibility of gas, oil, and antifreeze runoff from increased parking of vehicles and boats. Check with the South Dakota DNR and Game Fish and Parks, and also South Dakota Big Sioux Watershed District and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Individual permits are generally required for projects that impact greater than 0.5 of an acre of water. Of U.S. individual permits are required for activities that result in more than minimal impacts of aquatic environment. We are also concerned about the safety of people using the trail system and just enjoying the outdoors in their own yards. We have a large investment in our home and lakefront property. This type of commercial development does not fit in with residential quality of life we all enjoy and expect to be able to continue to enjoy. Commercial development can have a very negative effect on property values. We pay property tax based on the valuation of our property. Will taxes go down if the property values go down? We are not opposed to all development, but any approved development must be compatible with the existing properties. And that, of course, is one of the requirements under the Board of Adjustment. We are not opposed to all developments. Your own duties list the need for compliance for specific rules governing individual conditional use, automotive and pedestrian safety and convenience, traffic flow and control, economic noise, glare, or odor effects of the conditional use, exterior lighting with reference to glare, traffic safety, economic, affect the compatibility and harmony of the properties in the district. We hope you will consider our objections seriously and come to some thoughtful and reasonable conclusion. Thank you, Jim Hoffman and Carolyn Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Austin.
Doug, would you make sure that Brandy has a copy of that for the record?
Yes. I'm also going to offer, for the record, the Gene Methke, Paul and Laura Mawson at 372 North Lake Drive. They're neighbors to the Hoffmans.
Thank you.
I'll cut this short. I'm Dr. William Howard. If Brandy would go to that proposed campground where Mike had his, right there. So in order to build a campground, you're going to have to build that up. Otherwise, it's going to be a slough of campground. It'd be just like Ponset down there. It'd be underwater. So if you build that up right there, and then have you go to the west there, that's a natural draining from where we farm down to Lake Compesca. So you follow that little creek right there, Brandy.
Okay, hold on, let me scoot it. It's not as fast as us.
Follow the creek, Brandy. So you go across there, and they're going to put buildings in the red there, and they're going to build that triangle up there. So if you follow that creek and then you go to the west there, I own that 80 acres right there. So we farm front and back, north and south to that acreage. So if they divert the water at all, we won't be able to farm the backside of that farm. Right now we drive through about a foot of water, and that's all right for a combine tractor. But if they close that outlet for that creek, that will back all the way up clear to Joy Nelson's place, actually. So then that, that wouldn't allow us to farm the backside of that farm. Plus, there's 80 acres in the county. You well know that you can build a house on 40 acres. So I can build 2 houses on that someday if I want. So now I'm thinking if I want to build a house myself, or I want to sell it to somebody to build a house, it's not going to be a very marketable product if I'm looking at the backside of a bunch of storage units or shops or whatever. So I think this is really not an area for C3 at all, either the triangle or the 80 acres that Drake owns right there. I think they should just leave that alone for now. Divisions are great and progress is good, but I just don't think that's the right area for a C3 in that area. And, we need to check with wetlands and see what they can do with wetlands and what they cannot do. And I haven't done that. Maybe you guys research that before you pass it to a C3 zone.
Mr. Vaughn, could you speak to the drainage question and the wetlands question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In regards to stormwater runoff, at the time of development, the developers are required to go through a process and a detailed review and design process that their civil engineers are required to put together and subsequently submitted to city staff. And then that review, those submittals go through the review with city staff. And when it comes specifically to the stormwater runoff, there are state water law and the city ordinance regulations that would be required of the developer to follow, some of which would include any current pass-through flows that are going through their land would have to be maintained. They would have to continue to allow those same amount of pass-through flows to continue. Any increased runoff that they may create from their development would have to be accounted for in both a runoff quality and quantity component. There are what we call best management practices that they would be required to install on their development, which may include a multitude of detention ponds, holding cells, sediment ponds. There's all kinds of options they can use to address those runoff concerns. And again, those are both based on water quality and water quantity that they have to abide by. So I do believe that some of the concerns from particularly the pass-through flows that you'd be concerned about, they would be required to maintain those same level of pass-through flows through this land as they develop it and account for that in their grading plan.
And so, while the question here immediately is the annexation and the zoning here, regardless of any zoning, no matter what development it is, it's going to have to meet those requirements.
Absolutely, that's correct.
Thank you.
Would that plan generally be available for review before annexation, after annexation, before zoning, after zoning? When would that plan be available?
According to our ordinances, that plan would become available after annexation, after zoning, but
Subdivision.
before building out the subdivision. It'd be part of the subdivision process. So depending on the circumstance, generally speaking, there's what we would require, is called a preliminary plan. And that is the phase where everything's been annexed, everything's been zoned, and then they need to lay out the overall plan with higher level of detail on what they're going to do with that area. So of course, the action before you right now in this meeting is strictly the annexation and zoning, and then subsequently in the BOA action, we would consider the conditional use. Subsequent to those approvals, we dive deeper into the level of detail that they have to meet the engineering design standards and the criteria that we administer in the engineering office and the planning offices for the city.
And then Heath, the preliminary plan would come back to this board on a subdivision anyway.
That is correct. That is correct.
Thank you. Mr. Howard?
Yes. I think he answered my question.
Okay.
I might add that even though you're increasing the value of this 80 acres, when you put storage units and stuff, you're devaluating my 80 acres next door, because now I can't build a house on it. I can't sell it. Somebody said, oh, yeah. And, Judy and them build a nice house across the road. Now you're devaluating that, too. And I think, there's enough places to build storage sheds. There's a lot of places in towns. And if they want storage, I'll sell them a lot. They can put storage up. It doesn't matter to anyone. But this is not the area for a C3, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Howard.
You bet.
Go ahead.
I'm Doug Mogg. I got a lot out there. My viewpoint's probably ain't as strong as majority of the people behind me. Hopefully I don't make my neighbors mad. They're their homes. I just got a cabin. I was up in front of the board. I bought a piece of land and I asked for a conditional use and a rezoning of it. At that time, I had the same viewpoint as Mike did. It's going to be developed into something. And I get that. I was in the same shoes. I was right next to an R3 and I was asking for a C3. They talked about a buffer, that to do it right, they should gradually get to a C3, a buffer area. Here, the majority of the homes are R1. homes that they live in and have to suddenly look across the street to a C3. I agree it's going to be developed, but I don't think C3 is the right choice.
Mr. Mogg, would you think a C2 would be a more appropriate zone than a C3 on 38th Avenue there?
I'm not sure, but it sounds like in 1985 the board thought it was. Yes, I do too. I think any C1, anything less than a C3 would be better. The board once approved it for a C2. We should take that in consideration. Why are we jumping it to a C3? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mogg.
This morning, Dr. Howard had me out riding on a pickup across country, and we went. He showed me this river that I didn't realize was a river when I was a kid, and I would walk in the area of the Kempeska Lodge. I would see this water that come in and underneath the bridge there. I just assumed that was coming from the lake, but no, it's coming from the northwest. And you see there on the sign, on the drawing, unnamed, and that crosses the campgrounds. And I know that if something happened there, that could cause some of the backup that the doctor is concerned about.
Yeah, and I think we asked that question with Mr. Von Eye, the city engineer, and he clarified the remarks there.
I'm going to offer a map showing the wetlands on the campground.
So this is actually the map here, and you'll notice these are the jurisdictional wetlands that the U.S. Army Corps has shown, and then so the proper permits would have to be received at the time of development.
From the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yes. And Game Fish Parks and DENR,
Yep.
all of that.
They've already got that.
Is that? Oh, the copy of the map. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any additional public comments before we close the?
If I may have a second to review my notes.
Well, I'm going to jump in here if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, please state your name for the record.
Austin Schultz. I'm also a resident in the R1 398 North Lake Drive. So I get that there's obviously visions of tax dollars dancing in our heads as we looked at the proposal, and definitely not against any development. But really, I just want to make reference to work that precedes the purchase of the land, and really reference the comprehensive land use plan that's been out. And I'm going to be referencing the West Kempeska growth area portion relative to sections 8, I think is the one that this ends up falling in. And so in there, really, and kind of references a lot of the points my fellow residents have made that are in opposition to this, is the traffic. So the first bullet point that's contained within that land use is the traffic speeds combined with the proximity of existing pedestrian sidewalks and or trails adjacent to the North Lake Drive is of major concern. As we looked at the proposal, obviously there's an increase of traffic. So again, these aren't necessarily my points. These are points that have been determined in the land use plan, again, all work that precedes us. So again, I understand that there's the visions of development, and you can't stop progress. We can always kind of remember how it's been. And I've lived there for, 12 years or so. And we've definitely enjoyed the environment in which it is. We understand the progress and growth, but in terms of the buffering and all of the recommendations within the land use plan, it's a number of points are made in there that due to the existing capacity of water facilities around Lake Kempesca, future urban density development to the north and west of Lake Kempesca is discouraged. Again, that's quoted from the land use map or the plan.
Up to 50 homes.
Up to 50 homes. But again, there's this sediment of discouragement of development of commercial property in this section in which we're talking of. We talk about, there's another bullet point of those sections that talks about in 1/4 mile of Lake Kempesca, the zone is an aquifer protection overlay zone. So that would definitely be a majority of the 35 acres and definitely would then fall within the section in which they're talking about the storage units. So again, a lot of consideration, not only just the cost of development, but what the city needs to do. The zoning or the area and the land use talks about progress of development. We know it's there, but it's in that plan that it would be looked at after 2035. So that is within the use plan and the recommendation and the work that all precedes, the purchase of this land with the grand visions of what it could be and can bring to the community. I just remember the work that precedes this committee in terms of the decisions and recommendations that have been made through that comprehensive land use plan. And that's to add on to, obviously, the concern of the current residents in the area. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Brandy, I see you, you're working on that. Do you have some of the information regarding the updates that are being worked on for the comprehensive land use plan?
Yep, I'm gonna try to find the west development area here.
Blake, am I able to come up and just speak on some of those points, or?
Can we just finish the opponent
Okay.
testimony
Yep.
then before we bring the developer up? Is there anybody
Is there anybody else to speak before we move on?
that hasn't spoken already?
My name is Maylou Austin, and I have a cabin at 386 North Lake Drive. At the end of our block to the west, there is a public access. It's only 43 feet wide, so it can't be used for boats. But I would, all of the campgrounds that surround Lake Kempesca have a swimming beach. Now, people come to campgrounds to be either with a boat or to swim. I don't think they've made any plans for that. So if they come across the road from the triangular part, that's going to be a traffic hazard because children will be coming over to use that small access way, or their parents will have to drive them to another access point. So this has not been very well planned out.
That public access, you said is too small for a boat, so what does that public access get used for today?
Nothing.
So the public's not able to enjoy it today?
The public can use it if they want, but there's a tree right in the middle of it.
That's probably an impediment. Thank you.
This map? Why, it's like not loading. What? Yeah, except the legend isn't loading, like the colors.
That access actually is an old road called Cuts Avenue, and it goes to the Dunn Farm.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where people would come across to use that public access for swimming, I assume.
Actually, this is the one, well, it's on there, and actually, but that one's not loading. And that's the one that isn't formally adopted yet, so I'll pull up the one that is.
Okay. While you're doing that, is there anybody that hasn't spoke yet on the opponent side that would like to speak? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Mr. Lawrence, as the applicant, would you come back up? Have some additional questions for you.
Mike Lawrence, the applicant. I work with Bob Drake, the applicant. Just to address a couple of those things as far as letters and timelines. I didn't send those letters out. I didn't create this timeline. That's a city ordinance thing, and I believe it was followed.
Yeah, and actually, I will speak to that just for the record. For the Board of Adjustment, they do have to send out certified mailings within 10 days of the public hearing. And for Plan Commission, it's not even specified. It's just that you have to notify interested parties. And so we do send that by certified mailing. And then also with the reference to that some people did not receive notification is because we do a boundary of 250 feet, which I did outline here too. And that is selected by the computer just through select by attribute or location. So it goes within 250, yep.
And Brandy, could you expand on that distance that we use as a city that's in reference to the state statutes on petitionary rights for those properties?
Yep. So if this were to be appealed, the only people that can participate are the ones within 250 feet. So that's why we consider that as the interested parties.
Per statute.
Yes.
It can be appealed to the city in the event the city was to approve the zoning, it could be reappealed, and then the supermajority would have to approve it. However, any decision of a rezoning is referable to the city under under 5% petition. When we say appeal, I want to make sure we don't mix it up. These individuals, 40% of those individuals could appeal not this decision, but a subsequent decision of the city council to have it reheard, and then a supermajority is required on a rezoning. However, if 5% of the public in the last general election were to sign a petition, it could go to a citywide vote on any rezoning.
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen.
Thanks for throwing that out there.
I mean, it got brought up, so I just want to make sure
Yep,
we were
no
clear.
worries. I just wanted to let them know I didn't send the letters or create the timeline.
I mean, that is the language, though. It does say appeal.
And I wanted to just emphasize the distance that we use as staff is based on that statutory language so that it keeps us from arbitrarily or subjectively picking and choosing the distance for any given case. We want to be consistent and uniform with each case, and that's why we run with that statutory distance.
Thank you.
Then the next thing, public access, as far as any of the public access is there. If, the city wants to do something to shut down those, close them up, no access points, I mean, we're fine with that. That's not, we did talk to Compesca Lodge Doris. Obviously, she runs the store. She would like people to drop their boats in there, fill with gas, get groceries and things like that. There's another access point that is fully usable. It does have a turnaround point. They could still park their car in the parking lot that we are considering if it's not underwater, correct? As far as the wetlands and the drainage, we've had DNR on site. They've done permitting on some of the property already as it sat in the county. We also have, as far as commercial C3 versus with land next to it, we could look at that in different ways. A lot of C3 connected land actually increases substantially by square foot of property value. And that's shown in a lot of places. As far as being like Ponset, I agree. It looks terrible. That's not our goal. We want this thing to be as good as possible too. We're not going to create something as far as that's not good to the community. As far as the Dunn Farm, we've talked to Winelda with our plans. We have plans, in the future for the 80 across the road as well. She told me personally that was one of the reasons she chose us as buyers, is because of the plans and the vision that we had, that she supported. She owned that land for, I think, 100 years. Her family has had that land in their name. Our plan was very important to her. So I just want to clarify that as well. She is the property owner, was the property owner, and she sat down with us. We went through everything that we planned on doing on the property, and she gave us her grace. So just wanted to clarify that, and if you have any other questions, I would surely answer them.
What is your thinking of where the campers that have boats and stuff, where were you anticipating that they would launch their boats from? If not in the access points of...
Kempeska Lodge would be a good one. Sailboat Landing is another one that's within 1.5 miles of there. They're all places that can launch a boat. Doris, like I said, she owns a store. She understands that having these people across the road, as she's told me, I'd be dumb not to want something like this because it does increase traffic out there. It isn't going to increase her sales to put a campground across the street from a lodge store. So that was one of the things that she addressed with me when I was there. Obviously, she wants to keep the neighborhood happy too. So I don't, like I said, we're not trying to ruin Lake Kempeska. We're not trying to ruin the thing. We bought this land because it's adjacent to the city limits, which is needed to develop. And you can't, if you go towards city limits, there's not many more options. So this is the first options when you get out to this location. It gives people in the northeast part of a town a good place where they can get to their boat that's close to the lake.
Wade, Blake, excuse me. What she's doing up here looking is the current existing comprehensive land use plan. I know it quite well. And under the current existing land use plan that we have in place right now, that area was not projected for growth in the original plan, which was adopted in 2010. And it was redone a couple times since then.
This is
Before
the
that-
2010 version.
That's the 2010 version? Okay, the 2010 version was not shown to show any growth in the perceived time, nor it was to be left in a rural character. Over the last several years, what's been going on in the preliminary draft that's currently online that Brandy has does not contain all of the proposed changes of the conversations that have been going on with this board over the last several months. And on one of those maps, one of the things that had been proposed in the discussions was that specific piece of ground, that triangle in that area, due to previous actions of the board, some discussions that had gone on, that would be a mixed-use economic development area. Now, again, that hasn't been adopted by either this board or the city council, but that has been part of a previous discussion. So I know that was something that you were just curious. I know we don't have anything to show at this point.
Any additional questions for Mr. Lawrence? Thank you.
There was some concern about ingress and egress particularly.
We're willing to work with staff. Like I said, that's a thing that when you get into a plan like that, it doesn't, doing all that forethinking without actually going to an engineer and getting his input on traffic and where he would like the ingress and egress. We would like it close to the lodge for usability of the patrons and campground to the lodge to get supplies, propane, etc. I know as an engineer, however, they like it coming off of another road. I would not suggest that. I do not want to see more traffic put onto Cutts Avenue, which would probably be the most logical spot to actually put the ingress and egress because it does create an intersection. But because of the neighborhood, we would suggest that not go there.
Mike, what's your thinking on the contractor buildings? Why the need out there?
Well, I put up one Facebook post on my personal page, and we have over 9 of the 16 that we planned on going, people that would like them. The demand is high because of the proximity to the lake and the people at the lake. A lot of them don't have room or size limitations on the sheds that they can provide. You can't put up a 16-foot sidewall in your front yard, which limits putting your camper in a spot, or some of the storage in your yards. Some of these lakeside houses. You look at the residential garage district. You guys have been dealing with this on Pheasant Lane. There's a ton of people that want outside. They want covered storage. They want a place to put things, and this is taking that. Like I said, we plan on selling these units. We don't plan on continuing to own them. There will be a association put together. These people will own their own spots. There will be the pride of ownership. We're selling it, so it has to be a marketable building. It has to look aesthetically pleasing. Somebody's not going to want to go out there and purchase something for $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 that is just thrown up. But we're seeing the demand. We know there's a demand out there. We know in the county that they're putting these within 1 mile of, well, one of them's in city limits, within a mile of the 2 miles of the lake right now, and he can build them as fast as he can, and they're filling up. And but that's on the other side of the lake. So the people in the northeast part of town, they're having to drive all the way on the southwest side of the lake, which makes their travel time to get their boat out to put it in the water excessive. It's about accessibility.
So why not take your triangle and run it north and south along the little road there as opposed to?
North and south this way?
Yeah.
You're talking about not the triangle, but the
Well,
contractor
right
shops?
across from the triangle.
Okay.
If you were to go north and south there as opposed to going.
We deal with some wetland and some drainage issues there. We're getting a lot closer to the wetlands and to the spot that Mr. Howard was worried about. When we met with the DNR, he actually placed okayed our first one to be the lot 2, I believe it is.
Sorry, but you indicated that eventually you wanted to bring another business in there, so you're going to be
On the other end
dealing-
of the 40, correct.
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
Yes, sir.
can we have a discussion on the zoning of itself and not the specific end use? Because I think that's what the request before us at this point in time.
At this particular time, really the question is on annexation, first of all, and the zoning of the properties, second of all, and then we'll get into the, whether or not the conditional use.
I think what Mike and Bob and everybody's talking about doing is great, but it doesn't mean that they don't get hit by a truck walking out the door and we have a gas station out there. It's really more of a discussion on, is this appropriate piece of ground to be annexed into the city? And it's C3. I don't personally care what these guys want to do with it at this point in time. I don't even think it's germane to the discussion.
We would only ask that you break up the 2 parcels for zoning then.
And we do have a resolution on the
We have the
table for each.
resolution on that. I think the discussion is going to be kind of en masse on both, but to me, that's where the focus of our discussion
Yeah,
of the
there will be
planning
2
commission.
separate action.
And so I think maybe, Mr. Chair, it's up to your druthers if you want to discuss one versus the other, if you want to have just a general discussion on both, and then we can break it up from there.
I'd like to take the discussion in 2 pieces, I guess. I think there's substantial difference between the 2 parcels, and we could take them up separately. If we could start with the one immediately adjacent to Highway 20, the triangle property. And so I get my resolutions correct here, Brandy. This is resolution 37 and 36 related to the annexation and zoning.
36
Yes. So the one that you're going to talk about right now is 36. And then, then the contractor shop one is 32.
Okay.
So this one will be resolution
Is this
2019-36.
Done second edition?
Lot 1,
Yes.
done second edition.
Yes.
That's it, resolution 30, that's the annexation is 36.
Yep, what I was saying is 36 and 37.
So the immediate question first, is the annexation of this parcel being adjacent to the city limits, whether or not it's appropriate to annex in the property?
I don't see why if anybody wishes to annex property into the city limits, why would we ever deny it? That's just my philosophy.
I don't think I've ever seen a situation where we haven't denied a request for annexation. I think the question really for this board revolves more around the fact of what type of zoning would be appropriate for this specific piece of land.
Which is subsequent to the annexation question.
Correct.
I will only point out that there are some larger cities in this country who are de-annexing properties that they annexed because it costs them too much in utilities and road maintenance. So that is something that has occurred in this country. Maybe not here, but
No, it
those are
hasn't
some
happened
reasons
here.
why that people choose not to annex in, it's because of those long-term costs.
Right, but those long-term costs in this situation, from an annexation standpoint, there is no cost to the city at this point in time other than the acquisition of a half a right-of-way for a piece of that property that's there, that we're already maintaining. The interior roads that would be developed at some point in time would be a thing that we would be looking at, but I'm going to presume that any increase in taxation from property values would pay for the road maintenance that we know.
One would think that, Todd. I'm just pointing out that there are cities who found out that was not the case, and they have de-annexed. I'm not saying we shouldn't annex or not. I'm just pointing out that there are instances where that has been.
With this being proposed to be commercial development too, that would provide sales tax that we don't currently have.
I'll make a motion at this point in time to pass resolution 2019-36 to annex the property. Recommendation to the city council to annex the property.
I have a motion to approve annexation.
For clarification, this is just the annexation motion.
Just the annexation
It's
motion.
36.
Yep.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion on the annexation? We'll take a vote on that.
Dargis Johnson?
Yes.
Ford?
Yes.
Dolly?
Yes.
Culhane?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Stein?
Yes.
Brink. Oh my gosh, it says Brink in front of you. K's.
Yes.
I was just reading. Motion passes.
On to resolution 37 for the zoning.
What is the size of the parcel again?
35 acres.
And presently, there's no Highway 20 access at all for this property?
That would have to come from DOT.
Given the size of this parcel here, in your opinion, Mr. Von Eye, is this something that the DOT may entertain direct access from?
That's a fair question, Mr. Chairman. I'd hate to speak on their behalf. I do know, just looking at it from an engineering standpoint, you're on a curvilinear alignment of roadway here, which of course would be a concern of the DOT's. It is a rather large radius curve, which does help to better accommodate accesses coming onto it. I would really be guessing, making a wild guess if I were to say either way, but I can see where it'd be justifiable to potentially have one, but I can also see some traffic safety concerns where they may not want to allow it.
And one of the considerations that they'll look at is other adjacent options for roadways?
Yes, absolutely. I believe they would take that into consideration as well.
Thank you.
A question related to the annexation and the subsequent rezoning is that now that if we annex to the center of the road, the city would have that half road, which I believe is a county road. Are there agreements in place right now for the city and the county on how those types of maintenance is handled?
We would have to work that out with the county upon this annexing and before the effective date. We have other situations like this where we have street maintenance agreements. Basically, those are what would handle it.
I should have asked that previous, but I just wanted to. Well, to get this ball off the roll, I'll just make the motion to approve the rezoning, the zoning establishment of zoning to C3 for this parcel in question, 2019-37.
I have a motion to approve the resolution from Mr. Case.
I'll second it to keep it moving.
I have a second by Dargis Johnson.
So
Well, I think I'll start. While I think many of the discussions and arguments regarding the openness and the natural beauty of that area were very moving. At the same point in time, there are arguments to be made regarding the individual's use of property and property rights that they have as well, specifically relating to a piece of ground that's adjacent to a highway. No, while it does butt up against other roads, it is up against a highway. A highway commercial would be the most appropriate zoning along any stretch of Highway 20 if that's what somebody's proposing to use for commercial zoning. The question comes back when you're talking with a C3 zoning, we have an understanding what they propose to do, but that doesn't mean that's what will happen. I think it was fairly certain if these developers get to do that, that's what would happen. And then the question becomes, you know, what have we done in the past? And we have, as a board, issued C3 zoning along Highway 20 within the last 6 months out there. The existing land use plan that's been approved doesn't necessarily promote this type of a use. The current one that's in process does have some codicils in there and some map amendments that would show this to be a mixed-use area. Well, again, that's just based on our discussions that we've had over the last couple of years. It's not final, but that's my basis for making the motion.
Yeah, I agree with the statements that you made, Todd. And I think for me, you know, the biggest standpoint here is really the fact that this is adjacent to South Dakota Highway 20. And when we do look at zoning from a land use standpoint, the proximity to the roadways, the design traffic patterns and things are things that come into consideration. What you want adjacent to a highway is this planned designation of a C3 highway zone. That's typical of the way that we would do zoning across the entire city. You know, if we were going to look at it from a bare ground standpoint, which this is.
So my question is, we have the motion on the table and it fails. So we have annexed the land in and it is not zoned?
We've made a recommendation to annex. If the zoning fails, the motion still goes forward to the city council, is my understanding, and the city council would have to establish what the zoning would be for the property. Matt would clarify that, but that's just my background. We're just making a recommendation. We're not the final say-so on this.
You are correct. If the motion is denied by the planning commission, it would still move forward to the city council for ultimate decision on both the annexation and the rezone, for that matter. And then I would need to consult with Matt, who unfortunately isn't here this evening, the city attorney, to determine what in the circumstance at the city council level would have to happen as far as.
Maybe I need a supermajority when there's an ordinance amendment. I think there's a stipulation in the ordinance that says if the motion is denied at the planning commission, a supermajority is required at the city council. Again, that's my history, but that may have changed as well.
I believe that component is true as well, Commissioner Keys.
So my question then would be that the council then would determine what zoning would be appropriate.
I think in either instance, the council determines what zoning is appropriate. I think the number of votes is what's at stake here, whether it's a supermajority or simple majority required for the council, is my understanding. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm acting as my recollection as a commissioner in prior experiences. If Matt were here, I think that is what he would say.
At that point, can they, let's just say the city council gives it R1 blessing?
No, if what ends up happening is if we say C3 or we say we don't recommend a zoning designation and the city council, they have the C3 zoning. If the C3 zoning fails, they can't amend an R1 or a C2 on the fly. It comes back to us again with a subsequent. We had this happen before. Remember Matt explained that to us the one time?
I would concur with Commissioner Kay's summary there. It is my understanding that they could not amend their discussion, their motion to lower grade zoning district. It would have to come back by the applicant to be rezoned a different way that would hopefully be amicable to both boards at that point, ultimately the city council.
I do have some concern about the lack of a transition-type buffer zone and the fact that the 2010 land use agreement really doesn't address, even though a new one is in process, it's fictional right now. I have an issue with the fact that what the C3 proposes here is not compatible with the current land use agreement that we have in force right now. And I also just have a little bit of issue with zoning county property, because we're assuming that this will be annexed. But it hasn't been annexed, and that's going to take council action and more public hearings, and it's not going to happen overnight, I guess.
Well, the practice has been historically that the planning commission will take the annexation and the rezoning at this meeting, and then because if we recommend annexation, we recommend the zoning, it goes to the city council. So we are in essence by just saying we recommend annexation, we're saying we believe this property should be in the city. And so since we just voted 7-0 to think that this should be in the city, the county issue goes away. We think it should be in the city. So if we think it's in the city, what is the best zoning designation? The applicant's asking for C3. We are now in the position to say we either agree with you or you don't. And that's really the rest of the crux of where we're at the moment.
Well, I can see that point. However, the basic fact is we may recommend it. However, it is not in black and white. I mean, it's going to be represented on all maps as county property until it's annexed. Is that not correct?
The presumption is that we are saying that this is in. From the planning commission level, we are saying we are presuming that this is going to be in the city, and if it's going to be in the city, this is what we recommend to the city council. The city council blesses or denies that reaction, and so we are moving forward. We've taken the first step 5 minutes ago to say this property is just as well could be in the city because that's what we're recommending the city to annex it.
And my other point is that it's not compatible with the approved 2010 land use agreement. And the new one needs to be fleshed out more fully.
And the 2010 comp plan actually just showed this area as rural development, not to be developed until 2020, which this was in 2010. So then it was projected that it would be developed, but it didn't specify what it should be because it just said it was rural.
Right, so it hasn't been fully discussed. It hasn't been vetted through a variety of people and organizations.
I think we did vet this over the last 5 years, 3 years in the development of the land. We just haven't, the city hasn't adopted the land use plan, the new land use plan that's being proposed. So there has been discussions prior to us sitting on this board.
But throughout this last year, we have been going through that land use plan and then making comments and then giving that back to First District. And then they will, once they have all of that put together, then we're just waiting for them to give us the plan and then we'll bring it to you guys for adoption. But it does include all of the discussions that we've had throughout the year.
However, it's not yet adopted.
Right.
Thank you.
The one thing I could see, if this was to be Zone C3, there still is a subsequent action. The subsequent action is a campground. I for some reason I think there is a tree line or something along a portion of that property that acts as a natural buffer. If it was to be rezoned and they come back with this, I think you can address increased buffering, increased distance, because I think the ordinance does require additional screening when commercial uses abut residential zoning. I mean, we're getting into the weeds of the Board of Adjustment action, but back to just whether or not is this the appropriate place for commercial zoning? That's really the question.
And we do have, other situations in town where we have highway commercial immediately adjacent to residential because of the proximity to a major highway. And that's one of the things to consider here is that while there is residential, there's also a major highway coming right through here as well.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, to Commissioner Ford's question, is in regards to the council's subsequent action. I think one perhaps clear way to consider that is, because we are a zoned community, the annexation and zoning always do go hand in hand. And what wouldn't happen is the council, subsequent to your action, wouldn't approve the annexation and then deny the zoning, because we would be left with a parcel of land that's unzoned. So by default, the annexation would become null and void as well, and the applicant would have to return with a whole new application for both annexation and zoning again, with a different zone. If that helps make sense as far as that when it gets to the council level.
That does make sense. So that's the way, so that's how the zoning can be determined.
Yes, the
All right.
council would act on both,
All right.
essentially. I mean, just like you folks would be acting on it separately, but in a sense, it's really, you're acting on both ultimately. If the zoning becomes denied by the council, the annexation would not move forward.
Yeah, our motions are handled separately as theirs would be, but we can have one annexation, yes, and we don't set a zoning designation. That would still go, they have to say yes to both for it to make happen.
We have a motion on the table. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, and having made our statements on this already, we'll go ahead and take a vote.
Dargis Johnson.
How did I know you'd start here?
I always go in line, I don't jump around. Jill does.
Yes.
Ford.
No.
Dolly.
Yes?
Culhane.
Yes.
Hanson.
No.
Stein.
Yes.
Kays. Motion passes 5-2.
Thank you, Brandy. We'll move on to the annexation of the next parcel, which is going to be Resolution 32.
Yep.
And just for the sake of the record, Mr. Chairman, that would be item 4 on the agenda. Correct, Randy?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before folks leave, the Board of Adjustment, there will be, part of that process is conditions that can be placed on the land. So if you have input on, or have some sort of say-so in terms of screening or something like that. So I would suggest before folks en masse leave, if you have any input or comments that you want to make, that would be the time to do that. And that will be shortly.
Yep, we will be taking that back up here shortly after we finish these ones.
Sorry for the interruption, Chair.
You're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have the annexation before us. Can I get a motion for the annexation portion?
I'll make the motion to annex.
A motion by Dargis Johnson. A second by Ford. All in favor of the annexation?
Discussion?
Any discussion on the annexation? I think, like we discussed on the last one, you know, the annexation makes sense. It's immediately adjacent. It's really the question around the zoning that we need to consider.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll take a vote on the annexation.
Dargis Johnson.
Aye.
Ford.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes?
Culhane.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Stein.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Now regarding the proposed zoning, Resolution 33, requesting C3 zoning.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Kays. Second by Dargis Johnson. Open discussion.
What are the conditional uses in C2 versus C3?
So as far as what they're hoping to do with this property, C2 does allow storage units as a conditional use, but it doesn't allow for the contractor shops and the storage yards. And that's an issue, I think, with our ordinance. I think we're missing a definition where if, you know, because it's basically just if they can have connection to water or sewer. And so that's to differentiate between the storage unit and then the contractor shop. So in the C3, you can have a contractor shop or a storage yard as a conditional use, along with storage units.
I can understand what they're trying to do here, and I do think there are, ways to do this that are conducive to building a quality building with appropriate screening and construction materials for being adjacent to a residential property. That's not really my concern here. It's about the zoning district and the use. And C3 being highway commercial, in my opinion, should be immediately adjacent to the highway, and this particular parcel is not. And while it would be adjacent to additional C3, there's a substantial amount of distance between the major highway and the proposed parcel.
And I can appreciate the fact of wanting storage units there. I get that. I mean, everybody wants a storage unit. I am not in favor of contractor shops whatsoever.
I apologize for my ignorance, but I'm not really understanding the differentiation. We're talking about the difference between having a toilet and not having a toilet?
Yep.
That's correct.
Okay.
Storage sheds are
I'm
not as tall though either, are they?
Is there a sidewall differentiation?
No.
There's not?
So we're talking about purely interior, right?
I think the question here is not necessarily about the specific use of the applicant.
Whether or not
Right.
the piece of property is appropriate for a C3 or C2, I get it.
And the request here is not for us to determine whether it's the difference between C2 and C3. The request here is, should it be C3?
Brandy, could you pull out the Highway 212 and other C3 areas of the community that aren't immediately adjacent to a highway but are adjacent to other C3 uses?
Oh, we can go down by
What color is C3 on the map?
red. Sorry.
So we've got
There's-
2 to 3 blocks of C3 use off of Highway 212. That's that area there. It's a quarter mile off the road. Pull back, keep going east.
So now we're at this here about the interstate.
That's Building Business Park, I-1. Take us back up North 81.
We're just going on a little drive.
Okay.
I mean, I think you can see it jump out at you on the map that where we are close to residential, we tend to limit it to fairly close to the major corridor. Where we're in heavily commercial/industrial areas, we do allow it to go a little bit farther away. So in this particular, use case, it seems like it flows counter to what we've done historically.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here briefly. You've got a single contiguous landowner that does abut the highway, right? Does the 40 go back to the parcel we're talking about?
They own the whole 80 there too, right?
Or 80 or 40? Or
Yep.
maybe it does.
Yep.
Yeah, so you have. So what you're saying, Blake, is that it would have been more appropriate to try to zone the entire parcel C3? I don't really have a dog one way or the other.
I mean, this parcel is broken off and split from the other parcel by 450th Avenue, right?
The applicant did say, though, that their intent was to develop the rest of that 80 to a highway commercial status at some point.
Yeah, I'm talking about to the north. So you've got a contiguous landowner all the way to the north, a single contiguous landowner, and it does abut the highway. I mean,
And even, Blake, to your point about 450th intersecting between, we do still we zone to the center line, so it is adjacent then.
no, admittedly,
No,
it does seem unlikely that there'd be an ingress egress on the highway there probably, but.
And in the past, we have looked at properties that are substantial size like that and required it to be broken up into multiple different zoning designations, just because the northernmost portion of it touches the highway doesn't mean that we would approve the entire parcel to be one zoning designation. My point really is around proximity to the highway.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
May I speak? This will be platted into two different plats, correct, Brandy? Two different platted parcels.
Yep, lots.
Lots, yep. And is there another area in town where R1 abuts C3? Or C3 has abutted R1 that we can think of?
The Dolly property.
How about in town proper?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
I feel like this is the same problem we had with the Dolly discussion. The lake by itself is unique because of what it is. Truly, the R1 designation probably isn't really an accurate fit either. And we should have a commercial lake district, which I think is what we talked about last time, of course, but we're now 6 months later or 4 months later without it.
Well, and so I did keep that. And because that is something that we are working on, just more so waiting to get the Lake Kempesca master plan approved. But actually, and this all still needs to be vetted, so that could be a very long process still of what we would like to see. But through any discussion we've had, we talked about the Lake Commercial District being, the purpose of it is so that there are conducive commercial businesses that are complementary to the lake. To promote commercial activity means that the lake is basically built out as single-family residential. And actually, like a campground would be proposed to be a permitted use. And as a conditional use, then this is where I came up with a different definition. So contractor shops seems to be, it's for a commercial business to potentially conduct their business out of there, where I think the need more so is just to have a storage unit with a bathroom. So to change that definition, and then that would be a conditional use as well as storage units. Just because storage is a big thing at the lake, and I know that we're always trying to clean it up, and we limit where people can park things and outside storage and everything. So this will definitely be coming, but I mean, if it has a lot of vetting to do, basically, but the uses are proposed to be in there. Yeah, it's basically just at the lake where you find the C3 abutting R1, and that is just because of the lack of zoning districts that we do have, and having collector streets and Highway 20.
And frankly, none of the lake properties meet the definition of R1 properties either.
Right.
Brandy, what does the major street plan say that county oil is that runs on the section line down to? Is that considered a major collector route for?
If that's county, I thought you'd know that off the top of your head.
I do, but I know the answer. I'm asking you as staff.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, it's a major collector in the county, but it's also within the major street plan as a major collector in the city street plan as well.
Okay.
But I was just asking, not trying to trip you up here, but which do we allow? And I can't remember off the top of my head in our existing comp plan. Do we allow commercial zoning on major collector routes?
Yes.
So for the sake of moving on, motion?
The motion is on the table. If we're done with our discussion, we can go ahead and take a vote.
Dargis Johnson?
No.
Ford?
No.
Dolly?
No.
Cohane?
Yes.
Hanson?
No.
Stein?
No.
Kays.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I would make a recommendation that with the failure of the motion, that we still come back with a recommendation to the city council to provide them direction, whether or not that if the C3 isn't the appropriate zone, what would be the appropriate zone on this property.
Do we need to take that as an additional motion?
I would make a recommendation that we do that.
Would you make a motion?
I would have those that voted against it make the motion. Of what the, if C3 is inappropriate, the 5 of you that voted against, what is the appropriate zone?
I'd prefer to have the applicant come back with their opinion on that. I don't feel like I need to put an opinion. I need to analyze what their opinion is. I don't feel comfortable giving them my opinion.
And Mr. Chair, without Brandy having called that, just for clarity, that last vote did fail 5-2, so the rezone was denied, and that will be passed on to the city council at their subsequent meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heath. I'm not sure if I can add this. I'm not sure if this would fit with what the applicant is wanting to do as far as what he would have asked for a conditional use. But if RG would be a suggestion. Sorry, RG is residential garages.
Which was tailored sort of specifically for the Lake District, right?
Yep, and for storage, and that they can have bathrooms, sewer and water connections, and they would look like residential properties.
And how?
Sidewalls?
Sidewalls, yeah.
The sidewalls can be 16 feet.
We have authorized RG district in this vicinity. That would be certainly something for, I think, city staff to explore with the applicant.
What about zero lot lines? I think the applicant indicated condoing, which I assume means that a single building with zero lot lines.
And that's okay to do, kind of what the RG district on Pompesca Drive, that's what they're doing. And so if they would be condo platted, then it's just a matter of, as long as you're able to meet everything in the zoning district, all the requirements, and the RG district does have a lot of, I guess, restrictive requirements as to protect the aesthetics and the amount of impervious surface on the lot and the size and everything. So, yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought.
As it stands, though, there's been no recommendation of what, so it just goes to the city council, will annex it, good luck.
Yep.
I see Dan sitting here. So hopefully you've been taking notes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to go into temporary recess of the Watertown City Planning Commission and reconvene as the Board of Adjustment to deal with the issues of Board of Adjustment requests so that we're consistent and we don't forget everything we just talked about when we have to go back again.
Thank you, Mr. Kays. Got a motion by Mr. Kays, second by Colhane. All in favor of recess?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll move. Correct.
I have no idea. I think that's what it is.
Yep. Because it's only a conditional use in the
The other thing on that campground too, we want to make sure we talk about what the separation should be. Something we want to make sure.
Pass that to Mark for his signature there. That's got your name on it.
That'd be you. This is one of those beer meetings.
The DOT has approved data. They can't just decide where they're going to go.
Well, it seems to me the natural place for the road is on,
And that's what, where he is. Speed limit goes from 65 to 45. Those- And there's the former owner of all that land was done. All of that.
They're not living there.
Her daughter, well, they didn't sell the home place, they sold the other. Did they?
I'm sure they sold it.
she can live there until.
Did they sell the whole?
That's too bad. We didn't know.
Except campground is only allowed in C3.
I don't know.
Hey, Grandma.
They gotta stand up.
Jake's home alone, I hope he had enough boxes of cereal. The Rob Drake bought the 80 acres, he didn't buy it, it was whole farms.
He bought everything that Wendy had.
We don't have a Stony
Well,
Point on this side.
that's a good question. Why they put it back on the other side of Highway 2?
He's got plans for that, I suspect. I got the job. No.
Sure.
Well, these are recommendations to the city council. Sometimes they rubber, complain that they rubber stamped, and others complain that they've done all the work down here, and then city council reverses it.
Yeah.
You never know.
Oh, wow. I don't know about it.
I started wearing the support hose at 5.
I didn't. Maybe we can buy some popcorn or something.
But my legs are so short that they don't make them short. This short size comes up behind my knee and cuts off my leg. So I can't. Yeah, and then it gets really tight there.
Yeah.
I don't like that. But whether the zone gives you all kinds of stuff.
Remember there was trees
How are
that
you? How are you gonna keep up?
went onto the property. Well, there's water there. Places where they build are not there.
Yeah, they'd have to plant 122 to buffer that. They'd be required to plant 122 trees if they campground that. Because of the rule, the ordinance that requires 1 tree for every. Anyway, that's in your paperwork that you handed out.
I think we'll get ready to start up here again.
I figured it's something.
So we'll had a temporary recess at the Board of Adjustment. We'll reconvene now at this time, and we'll pick up from item 2 on the agenda. Turn it over to Jill.
Okay. Applicant, owner Robert and Pamela Drake seek approval to operate a campground in the C3 Highway Commercial District pursuant to Section 21-28038 of the zoning ordinance and contingent upon compliance with Chapter 2176 campgrounds, Section 210202 2B7A through H, specific rules governing individual conditional uses, and all other ordinance regulations. Staff finds that campground is a listed conditional use for the C3 Highway Commercial District per 21-28038. The definition of campground is a plot of ground for public use upon which 2 or more campsites are located, established, maintained, advertised, or held out to the public to be a place where camping units may be located and occupied as temporary living quarters. Campgrounds for tent trailers and recreational vehicles should be sited with consideration for access to the property. The campground should be designed to minimize the impact from adjacent major thoroughfares. The applicant submitted written request and survey of the proposed Lot 1 done second edition. Said drawing reflects compliance or non-compliance with the following terms of the ordinance. 210202 2B7A through H is specific rules governing individual conditional uses, which includes board review of ingress, egress, off-street parking and loading, refuse, utilities, service areas, screening and buffering, signage, exterior lighting, required yards and open space, and general compatibility with the neighborhood. Chapter 2163, off-street parking and loading requirements and engineering design standards. The submitted survey does not show off-street parking spaces or internal road layout. However, sufficient area exists for the minimum necessary. Per 1904-12 off-street automobile parking spaces, the off-street parking spaces shall be provided at the ratio of 1 parking stall for each sleeping accommodation in any automobile court or tourist home and each camp unit in any automobile camp. Chapter 2165, outside storage and display requirements for specific uses. The submitted documents do not indicate plans for outside storage, displays, or screening. But the outside storage requirements of the ordinance state that outside storage may be permitted if acceptable screening is provided and approved by the building official. Displays of merchandise which is offered for sale, rental, or lease may be displayed beyond the confines of a building. Chapter 2173, landscape and lighting standards. Minimum tree requirements that are going to be required for this development site is 122 trees per the submitted survey. So they do have some screening going on there possibly with trees. The required 15-foot of grassed boulevard, sidewalk, trail, curb, and gutter are not shown on the submitted survey. Note that the applicant is not seeking variances from any of these requirements. In Title 24 subdivision of land, the campground is subject to successful annexation, zoning to C3 district, and plating. This board must consider if satisfactory provision and arrangement has been made concerning 210202 2B7A through H and Chapter 2176. If application is endorsed, conditions of approval must be specified as compliant administrative permits may be issued without return to this board.
Thank you, Joe. A question on the zoning designation. So for the conditional use of campground, it is listed as a conditional use in the C3 highway commercial. Is campground a permitted or conditional use in any other zoning district?
No, I don't believe so.
No, it's not.
The requirement for the trees, these trees could be located anywhere on the parcel?
Correct.
Do we know how many trees exist on the parcel today?
About 1,000.
A lot. And the boulevard improvements, which locations on the property would the boulevard improvements be required?
Boulevard improvements are anywhere adjacent to a roadway, basically. They're considered, part of a permit, adjacent to a roadway.
Heath, with being that a large portion of this property abuts the state highway or county highway, soon to be part of the city, and is not currently curb and guttered, is that going to be something that you would discuss with the applicant? Would we use a rural section for drainage?
Yes, Commissioner Case, you're exactly right, Mr. Chairman. What we would do at the time of subdivision review, through the review of the preliminary plan, again, we would administer those engineering design criteria and look at any necessary street improvements for the existing roadways. Some examples we've done in other areas have had made requirement of the developer to sign a waiver of right to protest to upgrade or reconstruct adjacent streets that we're annexing in to meet city standards at a future date. There's a chance through discussions we may deem that, take for example 450th Avenue is acceptable as a rural section and we don't need any upgrades or performed on it. But that is all detailed information that we would dig into at the time of the preliminary plan phase.
Thank you.
This time I'd like to open the public hearing. We'll invite anybody up that would like to speak on this. We'll try to keep this, if you don't reiterate what was said in the previous ones, we'll take new comments related to the conditional use.
Start with the applicant.
We'll start with the applicant too to get a summary of the proposal here.
Mike, could you get the drawing?
You bet.
I have a litany of questions.
By the way, this drawing is vague. Like I said, we threw this together in hopes to working with an engineer. We engineered the other portion of the property, and it cost about $3,500 for that portion of the property, the one that was just denied. We thought this had less of a chance of passing, so it is not fully engineered. We would work with staff, Brandy, and take their recommendations and the recommendations of the engineers. However, we aren't asking for any changes or variances.
Well, being that we don't have a detailed plan, I know that was a concern of some of the people. maybe in the audience. And also, I just maybe would like to take the quick opportunity to run through the requirements of the campground to see how.
Perfect.
To get us on record, at least where we're at.
You bet.
You don't have any problem with each campsite containing at least 2,000 square feet?
No.
All the campgrounds are going to be connected to some sort of a city water, city sewer. There's going to be a dump station there.
Correct. Yep. I believe we have to have all of that.
Yeah, and then there'll be bathing stations.
There'll be a tornado shelter / bathroom / bathhouse.
Is the bathhouse / tornado shelter going to be constructed to FEMA standards?
Yes. It will be black. Very similar to what you see at like Sandy Shores.
All of the interior roads are going to be private roads solely for camping purposes, not to be maintained by the city, but by you as the owner of the campground?
Correct.
Access is to be determined by city staff. You're in agreement with that?
Correct, yep.
The campground, no one person can stay there for more than 30 days in a calendar year. That's understood?
Yes, it's not followed by any of our campgrounds, but except for City Park.
We're not going to be looking at manufactured homes or house trailers, what we would commonly consider as a manufactured home with a chassis and the cabins that you're building would be actually fixed to the ground,
Correct.
On-site constructed,
or modular.
Modular,
which is
but
just
they
like a
would-
ready-built home.
but not manufactured.
Correct,
According
yep.
to the city's ordinance. And you're going to be keeping a guest list, accurate records as far as length of time, so in case you were to be inspected.
Correct.
Do you have any issues? So being that there would be no parking associated with with the campground on any public street, all the parking will happen on the
Interior roads.
So really, the parking requirements aren't really necessary from our perspective as a city. Are you going to have any outdoor storage or any storage units that, places for your snowmobile, not your lawnmowers and things like that, or
More than likely, yes.
a mechanical
Yep.
building?
Correct.
As far as landscaping and lighting, you will use lighting that will still promote safety as far as separation distances and provide adequate lighting.
Correct, yep. That will be more of an engineer. I'm not going to tell you where I'm going to put the lights.
Nor am I. As far as landscaping, I think the big thing something was brought up before is that we don't want a campground to have the visual appearance that you would see other campgrounds to the south of us.
Correct.
And so were there objections that there would be any sort of requirements that would tree planting along the perimeter of the development along Highway 20, the county oil, or even?
Highway 20, we talked with the state. They don't like you to plant trees along highways next to them. We talked to the conservation office and we were trying to get trees planted in there, and there's a distance from the center line of the highway which they do not want you to plant trees. So we would follow that. As far as the interior roads, we would be planting along, and I can pull this back
What
up
about
here.
North Lake Drive?
Yeah, so we screening here, trees here, and this would actually probably be the last that we would get to. Like I said, we would start in this area, hopefully, if that's where we can get ingress, egress, and then move to here.
What about a tree line from the county oil and the North Lake Drive intersection moving north, obstructing?
Right here?
Yeah, using that as
There's a pretty massive one right here.
I guess the question is, the one thing that maybe be up for discussion is whether or not we want trees to have something of a fence effect. And that would as a screen. And because of, especially in the area adjacent to that R1. I'm just throwing it out. I'm not saying that anybody does it, but I just want to throw that out there because the ordinance requires that we address screening. As far as the setback.
Not adjacent to an R1, it's adjacent to agriculture.
No, any conditional use has to address screening.
Yep.
And so being that we don't have a plan per se, I just want to make sure we're throwing it out there so
Correct.
staff is
Wherever you
aware.
want trees, we can plant trees.
Other quick question is, staff, what is the talks about a setback of 100 feet front yard off of, that would come off of all three roads, would be a front yard on each one of those. Does that impact your proposed design?
We would have to design it first.
You're okay with that 100-foot
If that's the
setback?
direction we go, correct.
It's a requirement of the ordinance, so I'm just trying to stipulate that. And what you're basically saying is that whatever's in the ordinance your design will reflect.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mike, is this going to be manned?
This will not be manned, no.
Okay. And as far as the wetlands that are existing there,
They will stay, or if anything, they would be improved. Not improved as wetland, improvement upon a wetland per the DNR. I mean, they're going to be they're the people that are going to tell us what we can and can't do with that. I mean, we deal with them quite a bit, and we've been in contact with them on this site and the other site.
so driving out there, you see kind of the mow line that you just kind of, whoever's mowing it is kind of doing a big, staying on the high ground.
Yep.
Is that kind of what you're thinking of for the campsites also? Or
Yeah.
are you going to try and dig in there and get lower?
Well, we're not digging in it. We
No,
wouldn't.
I mean, are you going to destroy what's there as far as?
Not the wetland, no, correct.
Okay, so that corner down there, you show some campsites down there, or is that bathrooms way down in that?
Oh, it's kind of, it would run around or by the wetland on the road there, but you couldn't get all the little squares in there. I mean, those
Okay.
parking isn't that large when you take that square and put it in there. We will follow any DNR, GFMP, and Corps of Engineers.
So how are you going to police it as far as rowdiness and parties? Is that just going to be up to city and sheriff and that type of thing? Or, I mean,
Correct, yep.
okay.
But your phone number will be with.
Yes, my phone number will be on every piece, and I live less than a mile from there.
From the standpoint of, city ordinances and sound pollution, this would be subject to the same ordinance as any other development in the city.
Would you accept more than the minimum tree requirement in terms of, especially, I'm thinking in that southeastern corner?
If we plant one tree, we're going to be over a tree, but yes, we are. Yep.
well-
we wherever you tell us to plant trees, we will take that into consideration. Or we will have to take that into consideration, so.
Mike, can you clarify which locations you would have cabins versus?
Well, right now our plan is, like I said, we do have to have the engineering, but right now our cabin plan would start on, this is the highest ground. This is the ground that's out of the floodplain. This is where probably cabins, more campsites on this direction right here.
What's the total count of cabins versus campsites that you're anticipating?
No clue.
No clue.
No. We will meet.
They would each have to have at least 2,000
They will
square
each
feet.
have to have at least 2,000 square feet.
So your definition of a campsite is somebody pulls in an RV? for
Correct.
example?
That's a campsite. What would your definition of a
No, I
campsite be?
didn't know if you meant that campsite was, you had little bonfires there? And,
No,
people's-
it's at least 2,000 square foot parcel.
That would apply whether it's an RV parking spot or a tent campsite.
Yeah, some of them
or
are
a
going to be much
cabin.
larger than that. I mean, you get a 40-footer with a truck on the end of it, drive-through type thing. Like I said, we haven't done a.
You'll see the common anymore are 60 by 30 pads, is what you see. Is the standard. Knowing that we don't know exactly the density of the homes, other than we need 2,000 cabins up, 2,000 foot for each cabin. There's no objection to having a minimum separation distance between those cabins. That would at least meet fire code. I think,
Correct,
10
yeah.
feet.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Just because it was brought up again recently here in this discussion on the wetlands, those again, in the preliminary plan phase, any proposed work adjacent into, around those wetlands, we would be reviewing that, and as necessary, if they're proposing any encroachment into that wetland area, they would have to get the appropriate checkoffs. We as a city would require the appropriate checkoffs from the Corps of Engineer, DNR, on any work related to those wetlands. And we have done that recently on other projects as well, where the applicant either has or hasn't checked off with those other agencies, and we've required that and held the progress up until we got the confirmation from those agencies before we proceeded with the review.
And we're familiar with that process.
Doc Howard raised some concerns. Obviously, the flow rate, you're not allowed to change the
Correct.
flow rate, but do you anticipate moving a bunch of fill in and raising the flood zone on that western border where he's talking about?
On the western border, that's a possibility.
Okay.
Within the means of, you know, the Army Corps, the city. I mean, they're
Subject to the flow rate restrictions and
correct.
stuff.
Yep. We have a lot of fill coming from somewhere else that needs to go somewhere.
Any additional questions for Mr. Lawrence? Thank you. I'll open it up to others in the public.
Do I have an opportunity?
Yep, in just a second here.
Got some people in line ahead of you.
Brent Wilkie, we'd be 440 North Lake Drive, be right where that, well, there's that little blue, I don't know what it is on there. When you talk about wetlands and moving it up, you're putting water in my backyard. It's already flooded. And I know Doc Howard talked about the backflow. I'm not worried about the backflow. I'm worried about what's coming in. And the other point you brought up about not being manned, I camped for 10 years with kids. I can't imagine a campground not being manned. And I guess I'm baffled at a plan, or maybe I should say lack of plan. I guess too many ifs. And when I hear him worried about $3,500 of surveying, I'm worried about $3,500 worth of property value.
Thank you.
Lynn Crelly Gaither, 370 North Lake Drive. I agree with all the sentiments given earlier, but my big point I'd like to make is I would severely object to the secondary opening right across from what is Cutts Ave. That's going to leave traffic right into that little residential area, that secondary access right across the street. So I'd like to see that move down somewhere, up somewhere, not across from Cutts Ave, which is just a simple residential. It's not even a very well-maintained street from what I see. So I would really, object to that.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, just 1 second. Is that, Mike, is that to be the secondary access only for emergency vehicles coming in and nothing coming out? That would be gated? Does that assuage your fears at all, ma'am?
No. Because first of all, nothing's been even presented really to any of us that are residents, and just this, and this thing will mutate in various ways across the period of time, I think, upcoming. So I just want to go on the record that I don't want to see anything, any kind of access across from Cutts Ave, because I think that could potentially lead traffic right into our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm interested in the number 7, saying, providing that there will be no manufactured homes on this property. What are these cabins going to be? Are they going to be pre-built, or are they going to be built on site?
Jill, could you pull up the definition of what a manufactured home is by the ordinance so we know what it can't be?
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
A manufactured home is a dwelling unit fabricated in an off-site manufacturing facility for installation or assembly at the building site, bearing a seal certifying that it is built in compliance with the Federal Manufactured Housing, Construction, and Safety Standard Codes.
In layman's term, what does that mean?
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
In layman's term, how would you interpret manufactured home? Is that a trailer house? Is that a off-site lumberyard house? How has staff interpreted manufactured home?
We have an entire chapter on manufactured homes. Typically, there's type 1, type 2, type 3. It's just like anywhere around the lake or in town proper. The R1s can't have a manufactured home on there.
But what is the manufactured home? Could you explain to him?
You'd have to look through the entire chapter. Basically, it's a trailer home. Those are the most substandard
So
of them.
what we're saying under number 7 is that, for Mr. Austin's understanding, is that you can't have a trailer house out there, but you can have an off-site constructed home. Is there a minimum size or for those? What's the minimum size for that off-site constructed home to be located out cabin?
Depends on the type again, but basically we're looking at 1,200. Let's see.
But that's a manufactured. We're saying that
It has to be more than 1,200.
But we're saying a manufactured home, is that got like a chassis and wheels underneath it? Or doesn't it?
Some do. This is
So what can't they build out there, I guess is what his question is.
It has to be better than 1,200 square feet of occupied space, basically, which is what a type 1 manufactured home would be. And it would have to be on a foundation or a slab. It can't be up on a, like a trailer house is up on a frame. They can be pretty small, but these homes that he was talking about, these mini-type homes, would probably be acceptable there as far as our ordinance is concerned.
They would not be considered a manufactured home, I guess is the question.
I do not believe so.
Did that answer your question, Doug?
I think so. I can't leave the meeting tonight without expressing some disappointment in the manner in which you verbally make deals. Will you do this or will you do that without having a written contract and agreement? I just can't believe that our city operates and does business that way.
I believe that these comments are ratified in the motions, in the subsequent motions, and then there are subsequent development agreements that occur. So I think everything is on the up and up, Mr. Austin. So to assuage your fears using Mr. Keys. So when we talk about trees or something like that, that's incorporated into the motion, and it is, it has the effect of an order.
Okay? I'll wait to see it. Does anybody else have anything else?
Good evening, Mike Gaither, 370 North Lake Drive. A couple of my concerns would be, especially since I found out now that it's unmanned, there's a large section of it there that I could see if the people heading to the lake aren't funneled to these access areas, and there's going to be drifters looking for a shortcut, they're going to wind up heading to our yards and between the houses and heading down there. I would imagine we're just to call the police if they decide to just make a hangout out of our front yards or side yards in the process as they launch their canoes and come back. Does anybody have an idea, even if it's only under a seasonal basis, how many extra men it would take to be hired for this facility, and fire department personnel or police, in the event that it becomes required? I would imagine it would fall back onto the tax-paying homeowners, unless somebody can tell me different. I just see a large portion of that as a shortcut to the lake that I would imagine quite a few people aren't going to head down to Doris's and use that access there, or the small one that's at the end of Cuts. I think there's a lot of chaos waiting to come out of this that everybody will have to deal with later on, and I just thought maybe we could avoid that. That's all. Thank you.
Appreciate your concerns.
I'm Chris Wookie. I'm 442, and I just want to express that those two are my major concerns. And keeping people, I don't want to police people. We have a significant investment in this property, and we camped, and our kids wanted to go to the lake. We didn't camp for the campground. We camped for the lake. And this doesn't have a lake in front of it. It has my house. I mean, you know, we camped for 10 years, like my husband said. Those people will come through our yards, they will use our docks and help themselves. And I don't really want to spend my relaxation time patrolling that. If this campground was on the lake, I would feel very differently about it. It's not. There is no lakefront. I mean, there's a couple little accesses, and that just does not speak to me as a campground. Put it 10 miles out of town then.
Any additional comments for the public hearing?
I'm Trudy Robel, and I'm in the little residential area across from the proposed storage sheds. I think my biggest concern, I'm a teacher, and there's kids. There's kids up and down that road, and there's kids driving up and down that road. And you've got the corner, I don't know if you can do that. Yep, right there. Right down from that is where I turn to go to my house. I don't know if you can go farther that way or not. That road is heavily traveled by trucks. And I'm not talking pickups. I'm talking semis. And my heart just aches thinking that these kids in this campground, I'm not even talking about the kids on the lake, that's another story altogether. But the kids in this campground, riding their bikes, doing what they're doing, being kids. And it takes one accident, you guys. I don't know. I just don't think it's worth a life of a child. I also don't think it's worth the people that live along that road to be able to have to police their roads, police their property, look at a campground. I just think about it, please.
Austin Schultz, 398 North Lake Drive. So I have both 398 and 396 properties. So I am adjacent to the public access that is referenced by Cutts Avenue to the lake. So I agree that the sediment in terms of the right of way or the passageways from the campground to the lake, right, is being that is going to be an issue. So again, procedurally, right, you come to this without a plan of development of a C3, but yet we zone and annex on this basis, make that decision, and then now we're putting the city in the crux of an issue of, well, what the heck do we do with it, right? So we make these side dealings of, or public and on-record dealings in terms of what it should and shouldn't have, as though a C3, the only thing that's going to be there is a campground, right? So the proposals in front of City Council to do this as a C3, which has many uses, gas stations, hotels, right? You can go down the list. But we're sold on this dream of it being a campground, and then we zone it as C3, and so we open ourselves as a city for all of this. Again, also in the comprehensive land use plan, it talks about the major safety concern along North Lake Drive, yet we're putting more public and more traffic down this risk area that's identified and documented and made aware to the public, and the city is on record that saying there's a major safety concern with this. So it opens up a major liability for the city if, unfortunately, if something were to happen, that the city has opened themselves for major liability. And when I say city, I say us as taxpayers. For this, along with the policing. So, again, I share my disappointment with Mr. Austin in terms of the proceedings. So, appreciate your time.
Austin, real quick.
Yeah.
It's Austin, right?
Yes. Woodstock, okay.
Me, sorry. At this phase, we're allowed to put conditions as a part of the approval or the disapproval. We can either vote up or vote down on
Sure.
it. And if we vote up on it, we can put conditions on it. If we're to put conditions on it, like screening means fences or trees and things like that. I mean, I could see the southeastern corner being of particular interest to you. Do you have any input as to what you'd like to see, or what would, if there?
Yeah, in terms of trees, they'd have to be year-round foliage, right? There's a very limited time in which the leaves are on the trees. So, yeah, in terms of screening, I think permanent year-round foliage, non-fencing. It's bad enough that it's already going to be a commercial zone in a residential and lake, right, where the nature is part of the desire for people to be in that residential zone and hold home values. And the desire to be there, because that's what it is. So that would be my, is year-round foliage for
Would you,
buffering.
your concerns about access to North Lake Drive, if part of the conditional use permit was to stipulate that there is no direct access coming into the campground from North Lake Drive, it would have to come off the county oil or Highway 20, would that ameliorate that a little bit for you?
For vehicles, but also the foot traffic.
Yeah,
And a way to
I'm-
monitor the foot traffic without, additional cost to policing and the reliance on homeowners to do that for this business. That would be my condition, is the mitigation of those behaviors of people that cross in the yards or through those points.
Signage, would you recommend signage to be required to informing the people that are staying there?
Signage is a poor antecedent to control human behavior, so I would not feel as though that would be adequate to task.
If there was a condition stipulating the owner of the permit to be responsible for those individuals that are doing it, and there are a certain threshold of numbers of times where people are trespassing on property and it's documented and proven, that they could forego the permit? I mean, is that something that would trip your trigger? I mean, would you support something like that? I'm just looking for ideas.
No, totally understand that.
If that were developed into residential property across the street there, would that same risk not exist of people crossing your property, a perceived risk?
Big difference between a house and a camper. When I go camping to be at the water.
The sheer volume of people is the difference in what we're talking about.
And it's the difference between a homeowner and
somebody just being there, yeah, for a short period of time.
So I guess to, oh,
We're here, we're listening, we're acknowledging all of this. Like I said, we didn't suggest or come up with a great plan because it does front load it. Knowing that there's a taste for this, we would like to table this, come back with a better plan, talk to the neighborhood, figure out what we're going to do. If that works for everybody in here.
So is your motion, you are asking to withdraw your application?
Correct.
Accept it?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks. Have a good night.
Are we still in public, or did you close it, or?
No, public hearing's still
Okay,
open, you can go ahead.
I'd just like to make a comment. I come here representing somebody else, but I'm strictly speaking on my own behalf. I've been coming to these for a lot of years and sitting through some very full houses. Okay. Going back to the storage ones, I sat here a couple years ago with a full house, people arguing about having campers in the front yard, side yard. I mean, I understand both sides. Somebody comes up with a plan to build a place to put them, and everybody shoots it down in the neighborhood. Nobody wants it next to them. They have to be built somewhere. Otherwise, I don't think you should be telling people that they can't have their camper next to their house if you're at the same time telling people they can't build a storage unit. And I hate to say this, but that land's been there for a long time. And somebody else could have bought it and kept it as nature, but somebody's looking at investing real money into this and helping the city bring people in. I happen to know both of them. I just know them. I know it's going to be a quality development. It's not going to be an old mobile home like you see on South 81 when you head down south. And the people worrying about crossing their property. I live next to a commercial development that has a casino, Bob Graff that just was here, and some car sales. If I have a drunk person leaving the casino at night, walking through my yard, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to call the police. It's not up to somebody else to provide the law that the city already does. If somebody walks across their yard now, you have the right to call the police. I live next to a casino and I don't have anybody walking through my yard that I know of. So I just think that everybody's worries get so heightened because somebody wants to develop something. And people want more taxes. People want an ice arena. People want the rec center, all this stuff. It takes money. And if somebody's willing to develop something and help bring money into this community, I just hate to see that there's all these stumbling blocks over and over and over again that people have to go through because somebody don't want it in their neighborhood. And if it was put out in the county 20 miles out, there'd be some farmer complaining that he didn't want it. That's all I got to say. If we're going to have development, we need to do something that allows these developers to do the work instead of saying no every time somebody wants to do something. That's it.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
I think this matters closed.
So this matter is closed now with the applicant rescinding their request. We will move on to any old business that we have.
I would just wanted to make one comment. When they come with the plan, I hope that maybe they will consider in that plan an individual person that was there 24 hours a day that will make some of our concerns less.
Mr. Chairman,
Appreciate it. Thank you.
if I can make one comment as to maybe the applicant while they're still in the room. As far as the plan requirements when it comes to the conditional use application, we are bound by the terms in the ordinance as far as what we can require them to provide. So I just want to heed caution that they can definitely provide over and above what's required in section 210202, part 2B7, A through H. But that is the crux, really, of what the Board of Adjustments' role is in assessing when they do bring forth, if they do bring forth another conditional use application. And I just wanted the general public to know that and remind the applicant of that as well, as far as the ordinance requirements.
One other thing that might make this a little bit easier in our planning, there's a 30-day maximum that you have on campgrounds. Like City Memorial Park has somebody that's there all year round. Well, I can't do that based on your ordinance. I can't have somebody on site living there for free. You give them their campsite, they would look over the campground. By your ordinance, I can't do that.
It's a valid point.
The other item, we're going to have to, Mr., are you withdrawing the other item associated with the,
I don't think we can take any action on that item.
You can, because it goes to I can still refer the zoning to the city council, but we have a different, it's a higher density plan, but if you come back with a C2, the smaller lot sizes allow there to be considerable more development on it. So
I guess since that's what I'm trying to understand, where we have to deal with it, it's been asked. The question is, do you want to withdraw that request until after the city? Because the request, my recommendation would be to deny, because the property is not going to be adequately zoned.
you can deny it, and then I can make that decision going forward. So I will not. I'll just leave that one if you guys want to act on it. But we have another plan. It's just a different.
Is there a timetable
plan.
that they could reapply, or do they have to wait?
6 months.
Is that adequate?
It would be substantially different in a different zone, so that would be fine.
Is that okay for you if it goes to a denial, that 6 months, putting you out from a subsequent
So the denial puts me out 6 months,
Why don't you-
regardless. So I'll pull it.
pull it?
Pull it.
Sounds good.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
What else we got on the Board of Adjustment? Is that it?
We got any old business?
No.
No old business?
No, sir.
I'll take a motion to adjourn. A motion,
The Board of Adjustment.
motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to reconvene or that's up to you. Reconvene as the Planning Commission now.
Yeah, I'll reconvene as the Planning Commission. We'll pick up where we left off on agenda item 6.
Okay, so we're on item number 6. So this is the commission consideration of resolution number 2019-35, a zoning text amendment to chapter 2105, establishments of districts of the revised ordinances of the city of Watertown, amending the overlay district list to include the downtown, or the DT downtown overlay district. So this is strictly just house cleaning. Now that the downtown overlay district is effective, it just needs to be added to the list in Title 21.
So moved.
Oh, we need a public hearing on this?
Yeah,
We'll open the public hearing.
I like the efficiency though, Liam. No.
Oh.
I'll close the public hearing.
Motion to approve?
I have a motion to approve by Mr. Kays.
Second.
Second by Cole Hain. Any additional discussion on this? Go ahead and take a vote.
Dargis Johnson?
Yes.
Ford?
Yes.
Dolly?
Yes.
Colleen?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Stein? Kays?
Yes.
All right, motion passes 7-0.
On to agenda item 7.
All right, and this is commission consideration of resolution number 2019-34, a zoning text amendment to chapter 2132, light industrial district, allowing caretakers residences from a permitted use to a conditional use. So the idea here, this went through staff discussion, and with it being, right now in ordinance, we allow caretaker residents to reside as permitted uses in the I-1 light industrial district. And we're suggesting that we move those to conditional uses, and that more so comes for public safety. And so that there's record of it at least, that they would come before the board so that fire and EMS services would know that there was a residence in an industrial building.
Do we have very many instances in the city right now with caretaker residences in the I-1?
No.
Less than 5?
I mean, and kind of, I say no, but we don't really know because, or they're permitted. So they could be happening.
So this would help from a visibility standpoint primarily in
Yeah.
safety instance.
Oh, okay.
Open the public hearing. Close the public hearing.
Motion approved?
Second.
Motion by Kays and a second by Cole Hain. Any additional discussion? Sounds pretty straightforward. Take a vote.
Dargis Johnson? Ford?
Yes.
Dolly?
Yes.
Colhane?
Yes.
Hanson? Stein? Kays?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Under item 8, we've got open public comments for non-agenda items. We'll open that public.
I don't think she must not have showed up.
Okay, we'll move on to new business.
Okay, so this is the PUD planned unit development discussion. So in looking at this and how we currently have it written in ordinance, and we haven't, I mean, I've been here 3.5 years and I haven't seen an application. We don't have many zones that are PUDs. And that's just because of how tasking it is up front when it is zoning. And once they would achieve that, they would still have to go through all of the subdivision requirements. So let me pull up. Dang it, I thought I had it up.
Basically, Brandy, isn't PUD zoning really a zone to create something that we can't do in any other specific zoning district that we have in the city? So it gives us flexibility, or gives the developer flexibility to do something that's not allowed in any individual or a mixed-use type development. That's why we use the PUDs.
Yep, correct. Okay. Okay, so basically what we have in ordinance right now is we have all of the things that they would need to provide, or actually I'm going to describe what I would propose. So for them to prove that the PUD was an added benefit with having the mixed use districts together and how they were structured, they would have a meeting with staff as our DRT, which is our design review team. We would have a meeting, we'd meet on it conceptually, because this is also so we're being more cost beneficial to development and encouraging it instead of being cost prohibitive and having them spend a bunch of money and then get told no. So they would come and meet with staff. We would look over the comprehensive land use plan, look at any of the things that could be of a concern before even bringing it to you guys. And then they would prepare a PUD plan, which would include all of the 1 through 6. And I actually have this is an updated version, and that's not in your packet. So I'll send that out through email tomorrow. And then tweak it if we have any other discussion or things that should be changed. So then they would submit the PUD plan to staff as long as all of these items were addressed. And they're items that the adjacent landowners are going to want to know. They're things you guys, council, everybody would want to know. And then leaving the more technical engineering to the subdivision phase and have those reviews done. But then still, it would be a preliminary plan that would come back to you guys for approval. So then, if the PUD plan had all of these requirements met, that would be an exhibit to the rezone petition. So then they would bring it forth so you guys have a public hearing, and then the rezone would either be approved to be a PUD. And this proposed plan would be what they would need to work off of as they went forward in development. So when they started working on their preliminary plan, this would have to be adhered to. Otherwise, there's the amendment section where if it's a drastic change from what was approved for the rezone, it would have to come back to a public hearing. And then just so it's clear that building permits aren't issued off of this PUD plan, which is a zoning designation, then we added this applicability of subdivision regulations that just reiterates ordinance anyway, but it's just saying that all sections of Title 24, the subdivision of land, must be complied with in accordance to the approved PUD plan prior to building permit issuance.
And so in a very layman's, step 1, developer has an idea. Step 2, he comes in and he meets with city staff. I've got this idea. I want to do a mixed use type development. Staff says, here's the things that you need to bring back to us. Staff and the developer gets together. They talk about it. They all come in general agreement. Staff then brings the plan to the planning commission and the city council, and we have a hearing on the on the plan and the rezoning
At the same time.
at the same time. If the rezoning goes through, the PUD is just basically like a holding. It's like a basin. We're holding everything in there. They can do their PUD, but now their concept plan will come and work with you as staff, and you'll come up and make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and then you bring that plan back to the Planning Commission to approve as a preliminary plan.
Yep.
And then after that comes the plating, and then building permits will come after that.
Yep. Precisely.
And then any changes to what was approved in there, substantial changes would have to come back and be public hearing again?
Yep.
Coming before the board?
Yep.
Because the opposite is today the way it works is we have to have all the stuff done on the front end, and then if there's just a minor change, you still have to redo it all over again. This way, it just makes it more developer friendly.
Yes, and the requirements for what they had to present was very tedious, and I mean, it was as, you would have to come back for a public hearing if you changed an interior floor plan, or like the outside material. So it's just, it was not user-friendly, which goes to show because we haven't seen a request for a PUD.
We've only done one in my life here that I've seen in 27 years.
Yeah, so it'd be nice if we have it on as a tool, and it is a tool, and we should make it usable.
My recommendation is give us an opportunity to digest it, come back and let us ask any questions, and if we're ready to go, then go to public hearing.
Would you please send us or email us the updated material?
Yeah.
Have you put together any sort of flow chart to kind of see how this goes so it would be easy to understand?
I know somebody that did. We'll have to tweak it. But yeah, I mean, it's the flow chart was helpful when we were trying to work in subdivision with it, but it doesn't make sense to do that because it's strictly its own deal.
Have to, but I said if there's something there that makes verbiage visual, it's easier for people to understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the steps in the process and, you know, the change process and requirements around it and a visual flow would be beneficial.
So what I'll do is I'll have what is in the ordinance right now and then what's proposed. And then you guys can see how that, not a lot's actually changing with it. But then you can just visually see it. So it's helpful to digest it.
Good job.
Thank you. Okay. Are we
You
done
said
with that?
You're going to send that tomorrow?
Yes. You got to hold me to it.
I got it written down. I believe
Very
there was a
reliable.
couple other new business items.
Yeah, and these shouldn't take long because I do appreciate all you guys' time. And yeah, it's about 8. So communal living is, so we've talked about that before. The only thing that I want to touch on with that is, so that is allowing, it's a group home basically. It's allowing 4 to 6 unrelated people to live together. So I was at first thinking that that would be appropriate to be in R2 and R3 districts as R2 single family attached, R3 multifamily. But then I got to thinking about R1C and the particular property that this could apply to.
Are you thinking those conditional uses in that R2 and R1C and the R3 would be a permitted use?
Yes. Sorry, no. No, they would still, that's not a bad idea though, but because we do have design standards for what they have to meet. So yeah, we could.
I'm just thinking that some people that even some of their R2 are stereotypically a single family dwelling and they might think the density, I'm experiencing this in another community, that I think it'd be better to do a conditional use in something that's stereotypically a single family density because we are talking about additional parking and all those things that go along with it.
So you're thinking conditional use in the R1C and the R2 and then have it be permitted in the R3?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good to me. And you know, the thing with R1C, why I wanted to specifically talk about that one is because it is single family residential compact.
Yeah.
But, and the guidelines that we have for the communal living use, I mean, a lot of the properties would have a hard time meeting it because they are compact and you do have to provide off-street parking and whatever else we had in that ordinance, which that'll be coming back to you guys so we can see what those design standards are. I can't think of what,
We only have the one section where we've applied it, right? R1C.
yeah, yep. So that's all for that one. Thanks
Okay.
for that input, guys. And then the easement vacation discussion is just going to be added to ordinance because it is already, I mean, it's standard policy for how other communities go about dealing with an easement being vacated. Right now, we've been bringing some, it's awkward how it is in our ordinance because it's not specific. So this will just clean that up. So it's saying if there's an easement that doesn't have a function, that can be vacated per a plat. But if it were a right-of-way or if it was a drainage easement that was serving a function, what else? I mean, things of that nature, just to differentiate between when it needs to actually come for a formal vacation resolution.
So if it was serving no purpose, you could just do an administrative vacation?
Yep.
And to go even further, Mr. Chairman, one of the points of clarity we'd like to make with this effort is the need for easements that are being utilized and administratively being able to deny application for removal or vacation of those easements. I think it stands to reason if we had any existing utility, whether it be water main, electric lines, storm sewer, things of that nature that are existing, that we wouldn't want to even take the board's time and the applicant's money and time to entertain vacating that when it's a functioning easement that's required by ordinance.
Yeah.
So there's some clarity on that end too that this would provide as well.
That sounds good.
So yeah, that'll be coming forward as well. Something to look forward to. That's it.
Cool. Old business?
I don't have any.
Any need for executive session?
Nope.
Motion to adjourn? We have a motion by Stein,
Second.
second by Hanson. All in favor? We're adjourned.
Thank you.